Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the September 10th regular council meeting of the Courtenay City Council. And I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging that the land on which we're gathered is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. We have no late items, but we'll move into the adoption of minutes from August 27th. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, we'll accept the minutes as presented unanimously, and we'll move into staff reports, starting with infrastructure, environmental design for the Courtenay District Memorial Outdoor Pool. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbett.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, we're excited to present one of our favorite infrastructure projects in the city as a presentation by Adam Pitcher, our manager of capital projects on the Courtenay District Memorial Outdoor Pool public engagement.
Thank you, Jeff. Council will recall that back in early 2024, we requested and received direction to begin an options analysis for the Courtenay Memorial Pool. And we're here today to report back on that work. The pool is now 76 years old and has reached the point where a significant investment or a decision on its future is required. As part of this study, our project team reviewed the condition of the existing facility and developed 4 options for comparison: repair, renovate, replace, or decommission. Each option is distinct, offering a different lifespan, level of service, and recreational value to the community. At this stage, we're not asking for a decision on the pool itself. What we're seeking is council's direction to move into the next step, which is talking to the community about these options before a final decision is considered. To take us through the details of our analysis, our project architect, Kate Busby from Faulkner Browns, will walk us through the short presentation, after which we'll have an opportunity for questions. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
You're very quiet.
Oh, sorry. I'll try to speak louder. Is that better?
Yeah, you would actually seem like you'd gone completely mute there for a second. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. My name is Kate. I'm the project lead for the pool options analysis work. We're calling in today from Vancouver, BC, our Vancouver office of Faulkner Browns Architects. I'm also joined today by my colleague, Angela Enman, an associate in the office who's been involved in the project as well. We've prepared a bit of a slide deck today to take you through our work to date and give a bit of an update on the options analysis, and will be available after the presentation to and answer any questions and attend to any points of clarification. Next slide, please. So our agenda today is to provide an update. We'll be looking at the background of the project in terms of the previous planning that led to this work, the goals and timelines for the study. In terms of context, we'll go through the site and facility considerations. And then in terms of the design options, we'll go into a bit of the process behind how we developed the options that will be up for review, and the costing associated with those options. Going into a bit of a background on that process as well, and what led to the capital cost estimates. And then we'll be looking at the next steps in terms of engagement and final reporting. The previous planning work that guided the development of the pool options that we're reviewing today are the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was completed in 2019, and that recommended that the feasibility study be undertaken to look at replacing outdoor pool activities. Additionally, the Comox Valley Aquatics Needs Strategy that was completed in partnership with the CVRD in 2023, it identified that this project needs to be looked at further. Following that report, public engagement was undertaken by the City of Courtenay. And that What We Heard report that came out of that public engagement further identified need to look at this facility, but also identified that there was a preference, ideally, to keep the pool at its current location and maintain the current service levels while addressing the facility issues. So next slide, please. The project objectives that we identified in workshopping with staff led to 8 primary drivers and 1 project goal. This project goal is to study the 4 options and look at associated costing as directed by council for the future of the memorial pool at its current location. The timeline for this work. Next slide, please. Began in, in terms of our consultant work in February of this year. So a full consultant team, so ourselves as architects, but AME Group Mechanical, AES Electrical, and a structural consultant, RGC Engineers, began work initially by looking at the site itself and background documentation. And we also had conversations with the city's operations and engineering department. This led to the development of the concept design options through the summer and the associated costing and getting those ready for public engagement. So here we are in September, ready to present the options and present them to council for review in advance of moving forward to community consultation and finalization of the reporting. The next slide, please. So in terms of context, I think it's really important that we identify that the existing pool site itself presents some notable design and risk considerations. And these would need to be addressed in a more fulsome way, depending on what redevelopment option we looked at. So firstly, the pool is sited in an environmentally sensitive area. It's within a riparian zone. It's 30 meters, within 30 meters of the Solemn River, and would thus be subject to federal or provincial permitting. Any construction activities and methodologies would need to be in compliance with management plans and other regulatory documentation that would need to be prepared by qualified professionals and an on-site environmental monitor. Additionally, the pool is sited, while it's sited at one of the highest points of Lewis Park, it's also at one of the lowest points in the city. The redevelopment on this site would be subject to floodplain regulations. And in order to meet the current flood construction level or the most recent flood construction level, it would involve raising the site about 2 meters at least, and or applying other flood proofing measures. Without meeting the flood construction level, the site would be at risk of flood damage, and that would potentially include costly infrastructure repairs or potential contamination. The other consideration that we just want to highlight is that any proposed redevelopment option would require an archaeological overview assessment, and pending those results may require additional permitting under the Heritage Conservation Act and other regulations. So all of these context considerations would both add time and cost for any repair or replacement option. The facility condition is another key consideration that we looked at right away. Yeah, we can go to the facility condition slide there. Thanks. So our team went in and reviewed the existing site and all of the previous condition assessment reporting that had been done. All of this reviewing reinforced the need for urgent capital investment, either through renovation or repair or redevelopment, in order for the pool to continue operating in the same way on serving the community. So the primary noted concerns that we identified were significant water loss at the basin and also the associated gutters and the pool piping. We also noted severe concrete deck delamination and cracking posing health concerns and safety concerns. And there was also mechanical and electrical and general kind of pool envelope concerns. And a bunch of identified end-of-life systems and non-compliance items. Just given the age of the facility, this is very similar to what we'd see at other pools of a similar age. So the facility is at a point right now where we have to look at maintenance cost. They're starting to approach the cost of facility replacement. And so that needs to be looked at. The design options, the first kind of point that we looked at in terms of the design options, we're just identifying an appropriate program and just making sure that the water area and the associated support amenities were well aligned with what this community of this size would need or what would be appropriate. So we workshopped with the city staff to identify any potential aquatic amenities, especially for their replacement option. The aquatics need strategy clearly identified that there's not really a need for increase in water area, given the current outdoor water area with respect to community need, but it did also identify and emphasize a need for better aquatic leisure and wellness experiences and the community demand for that. So the city identified that at concept level, the minimum requirements for a replacement facility would be a 6-lane, 25-meter lap pool, wading pool, or beach entry, and then all the associated supports facilities for that. Then for the design options themselves, we looked at 4, if we can go to the next slide, 4 proposed options. These propose a range of future scenarios to support a comparative analysis. So the first is a repair. So really performing only the critical repairs and improvements to the existing facility to address operational health and safety concerns. The next builds on those repair options, additionally proposing to renovate the existing change room and administration building. And then the next option is a full replacement option. So replacing the water area, building a new basin, and building all new support facilities for the pool. The fourth option is looking at the closure and demolition of the pool and making good of the site for an alternate use. So we're going to go into each of these options. The first option, repair, it really addresses the most critical issues. It's focused on health and safety and really continued service delivery. So it aims to bring the pool back into compliance in terms of the health code concerns. It reuses the existing tank. It replaces the deck. It replaces the gutter, the pool surround, and it also replaces many of the piping systems that serve the existing pool. In doing so, it will address the water loss issues and the associated health and safety concerns, and it will maintain the short-term operations of the pool for at least 5 years. The second option, the renovate option, it includes all of the options that were proposed in the repair option, but it also includes pool basin and deck repairs and associated system replacements. It proposes change room replacement as well and additional mechanical and lighting upgrades. So this work further aims to bring the facility in compliant with health codes, but it also brings it more into compliance with the current building codes and accessibility requirements. This option will significantly extend the life of the facility and the need for any significant capital investment for 15 to 20 years. So this option, we also looked at a separate price with respect to the additional option of a wading pool. The wading pool that's proposed here is a similar size to the current decommissioned wading pool, but we've proposed a beach-style sloped entry into the pool, and that looks to better meet the needs of young children and caregivers. Both the repair and renovation options maintain much of the existing facility, and that also means that they're built at the current construction level. So that's below the most recent flood management plan proposed construction level to mitigate flood risks. So it would not be building in compliance with the current flood management plan required construction levels. Option 3, on the other hand, proposes raising the facility. It also looks at a full redevelopment of the existing pool, but it's in roughly the same site location. The replacement proposes a new 6-lane, 25-meter pool, a connected leisure pool with both stair and ramp access, water features, and then new service and support buildings, including administrative and change room areas, including a new multipurpose room. The water area and the associated capacity to serve the community would increase by about 1/3 in this option. And as I mentioned, to address the site's flood risk, it proposes raising the facility to the flood construction level, as noted in the most recent, the 2004 flood management plan. So to do this, we'd have to raise the deck level and the building level 2 meters. We would do this by using retaining walls and terracing and new landscaping. And ramping would provide accessible access to the facility. And the multi-use path that's to the rear of the site along the river would similarly need to be raised. The replacement option proposes expanding additionally the parking at the Lewis Center by relocating the splash pad and the current playground to the existing green space on the west side of the kind of the rear of the site. We've included a few slides just showing some recent facility examples and precedents of similar projects in Western Canada. The first is the Centennial Pool rehabilitation for City of Port Coquitlam, which replaces the support building and repaired the existing tank. The Wascana Pool, an outdoor pool for City of Regina, is another nice precedent to look at in terms of providing community amenity on the same site. That is a significant expansion of the existing outdoor pool. Similarly, the Mundy Park Pool, which our office recently completed for the City of Coquitlam, is also reused an existing tank, but then expanded on the existing pool offer on the same site. The final option is decommission. So we looked here at all the works that would be involved in decommissioning the existing pool and the associated building. So this option includes the construction of a modest washroom and electrical building just to replace some of the amenities that are serving this kind of the essential systems that are serving the existing spray park. But otherwise, it's really just making good the site for an alternate use. So the next stage, once we completed the reporting, we issued a package for costing to a quantity surveyor. The cost estimates that were prepared were based on this concept design work, and then a 20% contingency was applied just in terms of level of accuracy for the concept design level. The project also, the project costing also included 20% design contingency on top of that. And it also is that was just for kind of a general project design contingency. It also included some construction stage contingencies as well. We also applied an allowance for escalation up into the projected time of construction. The preparation methodology that was done involved a review of the quantity surveyor work by all of the consultant partners, as well as an external contractor experienced in municipal aquatic renovations. So these capital cost estimates that we're reviewing here include we've included for the construction costs and then the associated soft costs and contingency. We can really see that there's a real range in terms of the pricing. And the intent behind providing this range was really just to be able to support a comparative analysis of the range of potential options. We've also included in this slide here just what those estimated lifespan extensions are. So you can see at repair, we're really getting about 5 years of estimated lifespan extension before we need to see significant capital investment in terms of some of the additional end-of-life systems. And then also the underlying concerns around the ability of the support building to be able to serve the community going forward. In the renovate option, by replacing that building, we see kind of a lifespan extension of not having to have significant further capital expenditures for about 15 to 20 years. The replacement option, it's a full replacement. We will see kind of what you'd see for a typical new build facility, an estimated lifespan extension of 40 plus years. I mean, the structure will last significantly longer. And then the decommission option is an option as well that doesn't have obviously an estimated lifespan extension. The next steps going forward are looking at public engagement. So we want to take this option analysis and go gather feedback from the public regarding the options themselves, any other considerations that might be brought forward. The aim of the engagement would be to review this range and all of the impact considerations, including the expectations in terms of the lifespan, any associated risks. And then gather that input regarding the pool's future to present back to council. The engagement proposed includes an online display of the concept designs and cost estimates hosted on the city's website beginning mid-September. We'd be preparing information boards and posting them at the Memorial Outdoor Pool and the Lewis Center. We'd also be doing an in-person open house using those information boards on a date to be confirmed. And then the public engagement would take place online from mid-September until mid-October, hosted on the city's platforms. After this engagement, we would be presenting the outcomes of the engagement and final recommendations back to council in November. So that's it for the slide deck.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And my one question while I'm waiting for other council members was in the staff report when it talked about life expectancies, which was kind of my question. It was like 5 to 10 years, 10 to 20 and 40 plus. But in your slide deck, those numbers were articulated in a different way, which made it, I think, a little clearer for myself in terms of the value that you'd be getting when you're sort of comparing apples to apples. So I just wasn't sure why there's the differing timelines for the for the 3 different options, really.
Yeah, so the repair option, I mean, that's a really hard one to quantify. We're saying that we're expecting easily to get 5 years, much longer for the tank and for the deck repairs that would be done. The real point of concern are some of the outdated systems that we've decided that aren't critical. Don't need to be addressed in the next 2 years, but are coming down the pipeline. And additionally, it's really the change room building. The change room itself is not meeting any of the current code and accessibility requirements. It's grandfathered in. There's no requirement to make those changes, but from the health perspective, it's easy that there might be a change that happens in the short term, and there's been some concerns expressed. So it's we're just trying to express that this repair is really meeting select critical required needs and updates and repairs. For the replace option, what's been included in the report, I believe, is the same. It's at least 40 years. The renovate option is expressing approximately 10 to 20 year lifespan. I think it's likely more, because we're repairing the change room building, and we're addressing all of the major kind of system replacement options. So with pool facilities, there is extensive repairs and replacements that need to happen all the time. So I think that can probably be further. We're doing a life cycle costing at the same time. We can probably dive in a little bit deeper into that and provide a little bit more background with respect to those estimated timelines, and then what capital investments need to happen for each of the options.
Excellent. Thanks for that. We're having some feedback issues here. So every now and again, I may have to turn off my microphone. And so anybody else who's talking, if you hear the feedback, you'll just have to crank your microphone off momentarily. Hopefully, I'm not sure if it's just a volume setting. We may want to just turn something down. I'm not exactly sure what. Thanks so much for that detailed answer. It's much appreciated. And I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor and Kate, for the presentation. I'm just curious about when we go to the public, will we have information on what sort of increases in taxes this might bring forth? Briefly looking at the repair option, I kind of quickly consider that it might be something like a 10% increase to cover the payments. I assume we're going to borrow this and we don't have any of this money on hand. So I had that question, and then another question about if we want to look at this project at the same time as other, not similar projects, but maybe related projects. I know we have conceptual ideas to work on our foreshore and the river, connecting downtown to the river and that sort of thing. So wondering about those two issues.
The first question to that.
Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you, Councillor Frisch, for the question. Through the CIO to Mayor and Council, yes, we can develop some preliminary numbers. Working with our finance department, who is on the spot right now. We don't have them tonight, unfortunately. It's definitely a fair question, and certainly one that should be considered by the community as we roll out this engagement. So we will endeavor to do so. There are a few different funding models for this work. I would highlight. Depending on whether we draw from reserves, borrowing as you'd highlighted, or we've even seen some grant opportunities come up in recent years. So potentially we may not have to fund the entire amount ourselves, which of course could impact tax rates.
Yeah, that would be exciting. Thanks.
Okay, and speaking to the second part of the question, same time as running this project at the same time as other projects. Yeah, that's likely not included within the scope of this work. We could certainly speak to it if asked. I'm not sure if we would have a storyboard present that would highlight some of the other major strategic initiatives that are envisioned alongside this work. This may be something better addressed through the financial planning process, but certainly happy to take direction from Council or the CAO on that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think at the council level, definitely something that I'll be thinking about anyway. So thanks for that.
Mr. Garbutt?
Thank you, through the mayor. Just to follow up on that, at this point, until we know kind of what the preferences in the community are, the community told us this is an important facility. We're not going to ignore potential future costs, but because there's many paths forward, this is a facility that's funded in part by the region as well. Following some deliberation from council, we would recommend also being a delegation to the Recreation Commission to get some more information. It is, I guess it has been, and the reason why we carried on with this work was because it was identified as an important project. And until we kind of get some big picture direction, it would be difficult, I think, to land on what the tax implications are, only because there are a number of variables there. And it, given the importance of recreation to our healthy communities, et cetera, direction that's happening at the federal and provincial governments, amenity cost charge conversations and the like. So that it is a little bit of a complicated answer at this point, but we do and acknowledge that this is any option has costs in the community.
Thanks, Mr. Garbutt. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a quick comment before my first question, which is I just really appreciate starting on page 11 of the staff report, and it was also in the presentation. I think the most robust explanation that we've seen to date on a capital project as it relates to financial implications. So just my thanks to staff for hearing our feedback around why are things costing the way that they're costing, and detailed explanation and rationale around some of the numbers that we're reviewing tonight. So kudos to staff and our consultant team to bring us along on the journey for that. My first question is around the repair option, and I appreciate that at the beginning of the presentation you had highlighted some of the environmental context of that location. And given that we do have some modeling around our flood management strategy, framework, plan, and some projections around what we might be facing as a community around flood mitigation and floods more generally as a result of climate change. I appreciate that we've got some clarity on the lifespan of that option being closer to that 20-year mark. Is that considering our existing flood mitigation mechanisms that we have to protect any, if we were to go down that as an option? I'm just wondering, have we considered the flood mitigation projections in that? I wouldn't, again, want to present something to the community that in fact would be something that would put that asset at risk based on what we know around flooding in the future within that 20-year time span.
Yes, thank you for the question. So if I understood, it was specifically in relation to does the repair option consider flood mitigation going forward? No, is the short answer. It does at a very high level. However, there's not significant flood mitigation considered in the cost estimate, is my understanding. I'm looking to the project team if there was any further considerations. Certainly not to the level of the replace option, the full new pool option. This would simply be an intermediate step to carry on the existing level of service in the existing location, but still unfortunately exposed to some of the existing risks as well.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, just as a follow-up. So the current and folks in the community would see that we deploy flood mitigating tools pretty regularly in Courtenay. And so and I guess without our resident flood expert perhaps in the room, maybe you can speak to it, but the mechanisms that we have right now to mitigate the risks of floods surrounding the pool in particular, do we foresee that being sufficient? I guess where I'm going is options 1, 2, and 3, or options 1 and 2, I should say, really don't look at actually addressing the flood issue. And I'm wondering if what we currently have on hand to protect us from that is going to be usable in the future.
Excellent question. Thank you very much. What we currently do is actually under review. So one of the recommendations from the flood management plan was to review the existing practices. So I understand that work is being kicked off in the near future. So if we intend to keep the pool in its current location and its current state with the current level of built-in flood protections, the response would have to consider those as well to maximize any protections as available. The options 1 and 2, repair and renovate, do not consider significant flood protections for the sites as a whole. So my understanding, findings from the flood management plan and my involvement in the operational response manual for flood mitigation, it's a very complicated system down there. It's not the case that we can just pile rock along one specific section and everything is okay. The whole area or basin, if you will, is almost like a sieve, and water can come in from multiple locations. Staff have recognized this and developed a response over the years. I think it's generally viewed that more should be done, and that's why we're currently recommending and actively undertaking further review analysis. I can't make any guarantees how that may protect a repaired or renovated pool, but yes, it should ideally.
All right, and I think Mr. Pitcher has an addition.
Thanks, Chris. Through the mayor, and it's a reasonable question to ask. Like, we are not required to build to that new proposed flood construction level. I mean, I think there is a discussion to be had if we were to proceed with that in that direction. what should we do to help mitigate any potential issues in terms of building in that area? Because yes, to Director Davidson's point, it's an area that's very close to the river, tidally influenced, and yeah, there are some risks there for sure that we would want to consider and account for if we were to construct that option.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report, Kate. That was really well laid out. I found it really helpful to have you go through that. Yeah, I have a couple odd questions. I'm going to try and cram them in, even though we're not supposed to ask more than one question at a time. One point I just wanted to make off the top, which isn't necessarily for you, maybe perhaps more our staff as we move this process forward, is that I do think contextualizing the costs that we're looking at is really important when we engage with the community. It's not easy for people to understand what the impact of, 5 million versus 35 million, unless we provide some context for that. And how we do that is, I'll leave that in staff's hands, but I just think having a price tag on things without the bigger picture of how it would change, our necessity to tax. That's basically the only place that we get revenue from. I don't know if we're ready to engage on which option we're going to move forward with if we're not providing the public with the full picture. So I just really want to underline that point. One question I had was just around the operational costs of both option 1 and 2, and whether or not that would likely see a reduction in our costs or an increase. I mean, we're not changing the facility drastically. I'm just wondering if there is any measurable changes in operating that facility if we proceed with either of those.
Ms. Saunders.
Thank you through the Mayor to Councillor McCollum. We are working with the consultants on a life cycle cost analysis, and so that will take into consideration the operating cost impacts for all of the different options. And so when we come back to council with the findings of the public engagement and recommendations on the future of the pool, we'll include that life cycle cost analysis. So at this point, would there be any significant operating savings from those repairs? Unlikely, other than maybe some water use savings. The pool generally operate as is. I think there's still significant ongoing maintenance, especially in the sort of admin and change room buildings that would be required, especially in option 1. And thinking about option 2, we'll have to work through it just a little bit further in the life cycle cost analysis, but I wouldn't expect to see significant cost savings other than through possibly our capital investment, but not from an operating budget.
Okay, that was kind of my assumption too, but I just wanted to make sure I was on the right track. And then obviously a bigger facility would require some more staff and a bit more energy. So that one I think I've got in hand. Yeah, the other question I just had is around timing. I mean, the report lays out, and I think we're all well aware that this facility is in an urgent need of repair. But we do have a process that we're undertaking here, and the public, there's a public process, and then there's going to be a decision point. And my expectation is that we probably wouldn't be prepared to advance this for our upcoming budget. So are we looking at having a decision in place and some work being done on one of these options in 2027? Is that how we expect the timing to go?
Thanks for the question. Through the Mayor to Councillor McCollum, we are prepared to proceed with design given direction. So it is our intent to come back later in the fall with a report on what we've heard and request a decision from council at that time, and at the potential cost implications. So there is a possibility on these options that we could begin design next year if the project were funded. The design timelines, as each option changes, the design timelines are extended, and the permitting implications are longer as well. But yeah, we're prepared to begin the work if directed.
Thank you. And apologies.
Gee.
Last question. I'm just trying to be efficient with time, even though it doesn't seem that way. In my last thing, I just needed clarity on, because there was, our CAO, mentioned the regional aspect of this, but, really, we're in a unique situation where we're the decision makers on this facility, but, the expectation is regional support. And, I would just like a little, more clarity on, at what point we're going to engage, with the wider board in the region, and how that is going to tie into our decision here, because that could really influence how this council is going to support one option over another, is whether or not there's an interest regionally on supporting those options. It'll have a major impact on the cost. So, I mean, it's kind of an unusual situation that we find ourselves in. I can't think of any other thing in the community that we make a decision like this. So just want to understand that a bit better. Thanks.
Yeah, I think Ms. Saunders is going to answer it. And just so you know, there is an updated motion that's on the screen right now that includes that outreach to CVRD. But I'll pass it over to Ms. Saunders.
Thank you to the Mayor, to Councillor McCollum. So we have been keeping the Comox Valley Rec Commission up to date. As the Mayor said, there is an additional motion to direct staff to make a delegation to the Rec Commission to provide this information as an update. We do have financial asks as well into the Rec Commission, including up to detailed design, which I think we actually received this year because we're a little bit behind. But in terms of an official request on the capital funding required for the option, we've given them a range because we don't have direction yet. So they're kind of waiting to see what that ask will be. The engagement, well, of course, led by the City of Courtenay and centered in the City of Courtenay, we are talking about for an open house, trying to have one in a location not just at the Lewis Center to try and reach a broader audience. And we did see in our past engagements significant participation from across the region. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but definitely not only Courtenay residents. And so we would rely on some of the engagement that was done through the aquatic strategy, which was led by the City of Courtenay and the Comox Valley Regional District, as well as the outdoor pool engagement we did previously to look at that level of support across the region. But I would expect we will see similar regional participation in this public engagement that would give us a sense of residents' perspectives and, of course, understanding where they live.
You sure there's nothing else? Councillor Morin, the floor is yours.
Wow, I guess I get a lot of latitude after that. So I guess my first somewhat cheeky but also serious question is, so under the replace option, why not 76 years? Why is it 40 years? Why does that option not give us more longevity?
Great question to the Mayor, to Councillor Morin. Our operations team do a great job at maintaining our pool, and they've stretched 40 years into 76. So kudos to them.
A lot of duct tape and
probably safe to say that we'd get more than 40 years, but I mean, we might not want to push it to 76. Okay. Yeah, I was doing some comparisons with some of the examples. I'd actually started looking at the Monday pool a while back, and I believe it was 32 million. It was hard for me to find an exact price. And it looked like the municipality paid most of that. There was about 4 million in grants. And then the Wascana pool, which of course is in a different province, had almost the opposite scenario where most of the funding came from outside the municipality. They didn't have to pay much at all. They had a lot of grants. And that one was 16.5 million, I believe. And I guess I'm just curious, it said Wascana renewal. And so maybe Kate knows the answer to this, why the discrepancy in the cost between yeah, the cost estimate for our renewal and Wascana, with me not knowing, you know, what that pool looks like or how big it is or anything like that.
For sure. So the Wascana pool, obviously it's based in Regina, which is a different jurisdiction than the lower mainland of BC and has a change in cost associated costs. It was also completed earlier, several years
Right.
earlier. And escalation has obviously gone up a lot. There's been a lot of escalation in terms of construction costs. I think the Mundy Park pool, yeah, the latest estimate that you have, the 32 million, that is a project cost, an overall project cost, so not just a construction cost. And I think that's what's hard in terms of making comparisons. You can see that the construction cost versus the project cost can look quite differently. And I don't have the project cost. I don't know what that is for the Wascana pool. The Mundy Park pool also had some pretty significant GHG impact reduction work that was done in terms of the implementation of an air source heat pump for both the buildings, but also the pool water. So, you know, the pool can operate in a way that's 100% electric, which is pretty fantastic. And I know that part of their funding for that project came from you know, a different bucket of funding. So it wasn't, and I think that that's an important point, is that these facilities are heavy energy users and heavy GHG users typically, in terms of the fact that they're usually their energy source is gas. So these are a great way to reduce your GHG emissions in your community.
Right, so our estimate for the replace, does it include those same?
No, it doesn't include for
Doesn't.
an electric, a full electric system.
Okay.
We do have some separate pricing for some different systems in terms of our breakdown, but we have a basis that currently is a high efficiency boiler system, which is would have significant improvements in terms of
Right.
GHG emissions. Also the significant energy associated with the water loss that's occurring currently will have some both cost implications in terms of reduced costs, but also you know, it's a reduced energy and reduced associated emissions. Yeah, the reality is there haven't been a lot of outdoor pool projects in the province in the last little while. There are a lot of communities where there are pools that are nearing end of life. So Courtney is definitely not alone in this. We will, Enderby is undertaking a replacement right now, and so is Bella Coola. So those are two other examples. But it is hard to get the full cost estimates on the costs associated with those.
Thank you. I was actually in Bella Coola recently, and so I heard all about their call for their new pool, and they definitely need a new pool. Just one other topic, and that is around with the replace option. I know Monday Pool was able to increase their programming by quite a bit. I think it was 50% more, where are we here? Their swim club was able to, you know, 50% more swimming lessons, 100% more drop-in, obviously more resources for swim club and events. So I guess I saw that replace option as perhaps being able to accommodate more of that and also have other uses for the community, if with the multi-purpose room, etc. And perhaps this information is going to come to us in those life cycle costs, but I just wondered if there were any comments around that in terms of capacity and increased programming and increased community benefit.
Ms. Saunders.
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Moore. And I might ask Kate at the end just to confirm the actual water increase, because there is a certain amount that it is increasing by. So the direction was to look at options analysis that generally maintains the service level while addressing accessibility and universality. And because the aquatic strategy identified that the Comox Valley has enough water, but it needs some improvements. We did not look at a significantly expanded option. That said, so we are retaining a 6-lane, 25-meter pool, but adding a leisure component at the entrance part. That will help with some types of swimming lessons, for instance, especially for smaller children. It'll also add a significant leisure component for anyone, but generally families and kids and youth to be able to drop in. And there may be the ability to try and offer those swimming lessons and leisure opportunities concurrently. So I would expect we would see absolutely an increase in drop-in use and admission for sure with any new facility, especially an aquatic facility. The leisure component would allow us to do a little bit more swimming lessons. We wouldn't be able to increase, for instance, swim club usage. They have substantial usage of the pool right now. And it maintains a 6-lane, 25-meter pool. But our bather load, I believe, goes from, and I'm looking at Kate, I think from 200 to 300 people. Okay, good. And so that is a significant increase, but because we're not substantially changing the structure of the pool, we don't have any more lanes, for instance, to offer more swimming lessons at any one time. But that bather load increase will mean we'll see a significant, approximately 30% increase, at least in drop-in and public admissions and public kind of programming.
Well, having being sardined in that pool this summer, I'd be happy to have another 100 bather capacity. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moran. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Councillor Moran's question got me thinking about that GHG piece as well. And I guess we're currently using natural gas to heat that. And it would be a little rich if we just continue on doing that, considering a lot of the policy decisions we've made about what other people can do in town with gas. So wanted to put that forward. It might be worthwhile including options to go to electrical and including solar panels, perhaps obviously to me and everyone else, to make that work. And and then I guess my final thought was, that was actually it for now. And so
that's a good final thought.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, and if there's any response to that, I mean, it's if it was renovation, I don't think I could support going to a natural gas boiler, considering what we're asking the community to do on the building front. So I don't know if you've considered that conundrum at our level.
I'll maybe start through the mayor to Councillor. It's, we have a corporate climate action plan that we're doing. So we're particularly in a seasonal occupancy and the location, there is a solar array already there. It's a very old rudimentary system. So I would suggest as the city manager that in accordance with our other big picture policies, the future of that pool would include some type of energy resilient type of heating that minimizes greenhouse gas.
Wonderful.
Details to be determined, I would say.
Great.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Councillor, I'm going to go to, I think, Councillor Hillian, just because he hasn't, or maybe I won't then. Councillor Schoelacker.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just have two more clarifying questions. So we did a ton of public engagement on this already, and we got a really clear message, and the consultants opened with that. So thank you for the reminder. So my question is, why would we go back to the community with option 4, which is decommissioning, when we've already clearly heard from the community, and I think council generally is supportive of keeping the pool, keeping that asset. How we do that, I think, is up for debate. And so just wanting clarity why we were going back to the community with a decommissioning option.
Ms. Saunders.
Thank you, Mayor, through to Councillor Schoelacker. So the reason we included it in the options analysis, and I think there's a further question, I guess, to be had about how it is positioned in the engagement, but it's included in the options analysis to have that comparative of what would be required if council was not to proceed with option 1, 2, or 3, because the pool would be required to be decommissioned. And so we wanted to, I should say, provide that contextual information for council so that council is informed that if for whatever reason council did not want to proceed with option 1, 2, or 3, we would then need to proceed with decommissioning, and there is a significant cost associated with it. It's not sort of a matter of just closing the doors and then putting a lock on the fence. And so we wanted to make sure that that information was available. I don't think that our intention through the engagement is to ask the public if they want us to proceed with decommissioning. To your point, Councillor Jolicoeur, in the last engagement, 4% of respondents supported closing the pool, and 96% wanted the pool to remain open in some form or format. So we're not looking to ask the public if they want us to close it, but we want that to be contextual information for the public to understand that if no action is taken, that would be the resulting action that would have to be taken.
Thanks. And my last question was spoken about in the presentation. It's also on page 7 of the staff report. And I guess within the context of the costing and just in follow-up to Councillor Morin's comments around the additional assets, and we heard this through the aquatic strategy that was done at the Rec Commission around some of the outstanding assets that we lack in the Comox Valley. And on page 7, you've got extra small to extra large, and you've landed in the middle, which excludes additional new enhancements like a hot pool, cold plunge, water slide, and a multi-purpose room. And so, again, this conversation could likely continue at the regional level because there's also larger aquatic planning happening for some of these types of assets that we've heard more broadly is needed. But wondering what would there be a lot of additional work to understand what the costing would be, say, for the next level up, which includes some of those additional wellness-based water assets?
Thanks for the question to the mayor, to Councillor Jolicoeur. There's a lot of options here, and I think that was something that the project team worked to try and minimize the options as much as possible, and try to present something, that's that we felt was reasonable. As far as updating the cost estimates for additional features, it's something we can do. I think it'd be a reasonable ask, and something we can proceed with if needed. Kate, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Oh, we can't hear you again.
Oh.
Oh, now we
Here,
can. You might have
now.
to use outside voices.
So yeah, I mean, while it's something that could be looked at, we did talk about scaling to the scale of the facility or to the community, and something that might be appropriate, just especially given the high cost of development. Just even if you look at it from a square footage percentage, to grow it by that much, it's basically looking at growing what the replacement cost estimate is by that percentage, like at a high level, which is significant. But if an outcome of the engagement is that we're hearing from the community that we're missing pieces, or there's elements that are desired, that might be a really good time to prepare some additional, look at what additional options might look like from a cost perspective specifically.
All right, thanks for that. And Ms. Saunders.
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. Just wanted to add that a number of those elements will be considered by the Comox Valley Regional District through their aquatic strategy work, and cognizant that this is a seasonal facility, wanting to make sure that we build the appropriate level of service for a seasonal facility, and then those types of amenities where they can be expanded are done so in a year-round facility.
So thanks so much for that. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to endorse Councillor McCollum's point about putting information out to the public about the cost implications. And along those lines, I'm wondering if we can be reminded of what the threshold is for requiring a referendum on an expenditure. This is the largest expenditure I think that we've contemplated. It outstrips obviously the bridge and the fire hall, but what level would we have to come in at to avoid going to referendum?
I can answer both of those questions, actually. So I did a bit of number crunching while council was deliberating. I will start with the repair option, $5 million option. All these assumptions based on 100% borrowed. That might not be what we do. And I'm using an assumed 5% interest rate, as that is very historically accurate. So to borrow 5 million over 5 years, our debt servicing cost is about $1.2 million per year. That equates to a 3.3% tax change, which equates to about $65 on the average home. If we go the renovate option at the 13 million years, we would match the term of the loan to 15-year loan. Annual debt servicing cost is $1.3 million, brings us in at about a 3.6% tax change. The impact of the average home is $74. We go with the replace option, 32 million is the total price, borrowed over 30 years. Brings our annual debt servicing to $2.2 million per year, which is about a 6% change to the average home and $120. With regards to when we need electoral approval, it'll depend on our current debt servicing payments. We have a couple of big boring projects in the 5-year plan. So I can't speak to specifically what value. The requirement for electoral approval isn't a specific project value. It is if you're over the threshold of requiring one or not. The project could be $100, and if you needed to borrow $100 and you were over the limit, you would have to get electoral approval.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it does occur to me that we have a municipal election coming up in about a year, and so the opportunity to go to the voters is there. And we do have a number of other capital projects that, as our finance officer points out. The other thing I wanted to say is that I don't support spending millions of dollars to repair or renovate the existing pool. It just seems to me that without addressing the flood issue, we're really just kicking down the road a problem that we've been dealing with here for a number of years. So I think it's really a matter of coming up, can we come up with the dollars to put a new pool in place that addresses that issue once and for all? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Healing, for articulating that. And my comment that I was going to make at the end really is about the fact that we have our own resolution that we did many years ago, which says that when we're contemplating large projects, to contemplate that full life cycle and replacement. And I think one of the things that's not contemplated in these numbers is that if we choose the 5-year option or the 10 to 15-year option, there's going to be a cost at the end of that to replace or try to extend it somehow. And if at the end of that, the idea is now we'll build something better, that cost escalation. So we've paid basically to wait to pay more to build something that we have the opportunity now. And I don't know if I'm articulating myself well, but the idea that we have some options in front of us that seem very clear, but that one part that's missing out of options 1 and 2 is the fact that at the end of that life, there's now going to be what I would expect based on my limited experience over the last 11 years as an elected official, those costs are going to be much higher to do anything at the end of the 5 or 10 year period. So I don't know how we can articulate that in this as well. To make sure that people understand that at the end of that period, there's going to be a potentially, unless it's decommissioned at that point, but there's going to be some extra costs. Thanks for indulging me. I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just quickly, I really appreciate hearing those numbers and yeah, eager to see that go out to the public and good comments, Mayor. So I move the recommendation.
All right, any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. The motion as presented on the screen, which includes the staff going as a delegation to the CDRD Rec Commission and having this discussion with them as well. So thanks very much. And again, I think it was mentioned, a great report. So really appreciate the conversation we've had. And we'll move over into items 4.2.1, the permissive tax exemption policy direction. And I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Yeah, thank you through the mayor. Our Chief Financial Officer, Adam Langmeyer, is going to give an overview of this policy staff report and be ready for questions. And then we also have a presentation through our consultant that's assisted us in this project.
Nice to be here once again. So today we are presenting options for the future of the city's permissive tax exemption policy. I had tasked Chris Payne from Fit Consulting to do a background study on the subject. Chris will walk through his findings in the presentation before you, and I will speak to the staff's recommendations at the end. So I'd like to introduce Chris, and we can move to the next slide.
Good morning, or pardon me, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to, I know that you've got the slides up, but I'm just going to, I think, share my screen just so I can keep my pace, hopefully, and
you can only share your screen with yourself, so that might be a technical challenge.
oh, okay. Never mind then.
Yeah, and so yeah, unfortunately, yeah. So just when you need the next slide, just say next slide, and we'll be on it.
Works great for me. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move on to the first slide if we could. Thank you very much. So before I talk about the scope of the project, just want to introduce myself briefly. I've worked in the industry for 15 years now, previously as a CFO for a couple of municipalities. Also the manager of revenue for Victoria, where we did a pretty extensive permissive tax exemption review. So really pleased to be working with the city on this project. So as you likely recall, in October of 2023, Council had extensive conversations concerning the alignment of city applicants' social values and several other conversations about permissive tax exemptions subsequent to that meeting. You just continue down if we could continue on the slide, please. So one of the council resolutions at the time was that staff be directed to update the tax exemption policy. And so we've gone and provided a pretty extensive background information for you. The scope of the project included, thank you very much, to review the policy, other policies, so conducting research and present findings and findings report and a presentation. And in doing so, we reviewed over 100 permissive tax exemption policies. And keep in mind, there's just shy of 200 municipalities in British Columbia, so it was a pretty extensive review. So council should know that you've got broad authority to provide exemptions to charitable, philanthropic, or nonprofit organizations. So it's pretty wide, and you are required, pursuant to the community charter, to have a tax exemption policy within your financial plan bylaw. However, many municipalities choose to have a specific permissive tax exemption policy. The city itself has approximately 95 permissive tax exemptions, and the value of those exemptions are over $800,000. Now, we've sort of broken it up in the report by how much of that exemption is city foregone taxes versus other taxing authorities. You may recall that the city taxes on behalf of many other taxing authorities, such as the province and the school, BC Assessment Authority, Municipal Finance Authority, and your regional districts. So the message there is that when you are providing a permissive tax exemption to an organization, to its property, you are leveraging the taxes that get exempted from other municipalities or from other taxing authorities as well. So you're able to confer a benefit that exceeds the cost to the city. And the cost really is how that tax burden is distributed to your taxpayer. So, you can provide a tax exemption to a property without an expenditure being identified in your financial plan bylaw, it's simply fewer properties that pay taxes, so it gets redistributed to other properties. So as a reminder, permissive exemptions can be granted for up to 10 years in length in one bylaw. Places of worship can be indefinite. So you can have a bylaw that identifies a number of place of worships, and that bylaw is in place until it gets repealed. Keep in mind with place of worship exemptions as well as independent school exemptions, you're exempting the ancillary land. So the building itself and the land beneath that building and some other parts of the property are typically already exempt. And you don't have the choice whether to exempt that. They're called a statutory exemption. But you can choose to exempt the surrounding land. And so if you do so, you can have for a place of worship, an exemption bylaw that goes on forever until it gets repealed. And right now you've got, I classified them as several different types of exemptions. You've got your regular charitable nonprofit exemption bylaws. Currently, your term is 1 year. So that means council every year has to consider whether or not to exempt them. And then you've got some sort of charitable nonprofit, but they're special class. I call them the Island Corridor Foundation because they're sort of a class of property use that's uncommon. That has a 10-year exemption, so it's not often that council considers that one. You've got place of worship as well. Those are considered annually. They don't have to be. And then independent schools that are considered annually as well, and they don't have to be. So we, if you had an opportunity to read the extensive report, there's several findings, there's several recommendations. I worked with your director of finance closely to boil those down to really what are the key findings that you may want to consider. There are other considerations that you may wish to consider within that report, which we're happy to talk about. But for the time being, this is what we've got front and center for you today. So first of all, in terms of a financial needs test, sometimes councils articulate the desire to implement a financial needs test. And in reality, many municipalities, they do screen their applicants for financial need. They do that by requesting a budget or a financial statement or both of those. But in reality, there is no documented process for your staff to provide their opinion as whether there actually is a financial need. It's more of the judgment of council. So, as a CFO, I recall collecting the financial statements, including them in the permissive tax exemption policy package that went to council, but never was I asked to say whether or not I think X organization has the financial means to forego a tax exemption. And that becomes a challenging conversation without an objective framework. Now, we have put forward an option for a financial needs test, which the province currently uses in some ways. That financial means test is not in place in any municipality in BC that I'm aware of, but something for council to consider if that's something that's important to them. Secondly, value-based consideration, which was really primarily the conversation that took place in 2003. We could find no policies that explicitly require applicants to adhere to equity and inclusion in particular. That was the value that was being discussed extensively in 2023. However, generally, many policies said you have to align with the city values one way or the other. And city values can either be found in the strategic plan under mission, vision, values, etc., or other strategic documents. And there was, even in those cases, the adjudication of whether or not there was a misalignment between those values was not done by staff. And that's because it's inherently a political thing to consider. It can be subjective. And so, I would say that's a governance role. So, there was no a process prescribed in any of the policies for staff to assist with values-based consideration. Now, that being said, council has the authority at any time to consider declining an application that they don't believe is in alignment with city values. And that's, in my opinion, good use of your governance role. Now, staff do screen for basic criteria. You know, do you own the property? And other basic, very objective criteria. But again, adjudication that requires political, social values have been handled by council on an ad hoc basis. We did provide some options in the report for how council could delegate that in some way. Ultimately, it would come back to a council decision at the end of the day. But you could ask, let's say, a committee to adjudicate it. You could contract with an organization to adjudicate it and report to council, or you could ask staff to adjudicate it. In my opinion, those are costly options, especially if you believe that values misalignment is rare. You know, so if you can look back on all the bylaws that you've approved over the years, and you can find maybe one or two where there was some question of alignment, would it be effective use of taxpayer money to spend money on a committee or a third-party organization or staff to adjudicate that? Now, in terms of exemption duration, as I mentioned, council has the option to approve exemption bylaws that go up to 10 years or indefinite bylaws for place of worship. When we did the survey, we found that the median age or median range was basically 3 years. And that's because some municipalities approved exemptions for 10 years. Some approved them for 4 years. You know, we think it might be a good idea for the municipality to approve exemptions over a 4-year cycle. And the reason for that is it aligns with your council term. And so you will retain the transparency that's needed when you approve exemptions. And you retain the governance function in there, but you significantly reduce the administrative burden as well. And both in your administrative staff, your finance staff, and yourself, especially if you're considering this, you know, the majority are the same applications every single year. So to continue through the findings, we've also identified some opportunities for policy development. You do have a policy right now whereby organizations that provide a regional service can receive an exemption of up to 40%, but you do have a handful of applicants that are grandfathered there. So for you, we put together a consideration of transitioning that grandfathering away. If you would like, it could be you know, transitioned over several years. And that would ensure that there's some comparability between new regional organizations who are only receiving 40% and grandfathered organizations. So that's something to consider. Also, your policy doesn't really explicitly develop exemption types, and it is possible for council to say, you know, right now for our strategic purview, we really believe that this type of good or service benefits our community more than other things. I mean, that's what council does naturally in the financial plan. The budget deliberations, you are prioritizing what's important to the community. So you may say, well, for this term, environmental organizations are very important, and we want to ensure that they receive priority in our exemption considerations, whereby you know, maybe recreational organizations only receive a 50% exemptions. And that's just a total, I'm just making up that example on the fly. I'm not suggesting that that's how you weight it, but you may want to establish different types of exemptions and prescribe a total limit to each of those activities. Keep in mind, you know, it's difficult for council because when council approves grants, you're approving specific dollar amounts, and you can expect, you know, a certain amount of effectiveness from each of those grants. So you pay $10,000 for a program, you know what the program deliverables are going to be, and you can decide whether or not that's a good use of taxpayer money to achieve your strategic goals. Exemptions, it's a lot more difficult because you could have an organization that perhaps would receive a second tier priority with a large property, and therefore they receive a very large exemption. And so you're unable to scale the impact to the citizens to your goals. So that's why developing exemptions by activity can be helpful. And another observation we made was lease property considerations. Now, right now, if a property, if an organization, an otherwise taxable organization owns a property and leases it to a nonprofit or charitable organization, the city has the authority to provide an exemption to the charity that is occupying the space. So if you've got a nonprofit that's occupying a business, leasing an office in what would otherwise be a business organization, you're able to provide an exemption to that leased property. The challenge with that is that sometimes it can be difficult to ensure that that benefit gets conferred to the leased property. Because all that happens is that the business that owns the property, or whoever owns the business, the property owner, just doesn't get taxed. So how they pass that tax savings onto the lease, the city doesn't really ensure that happens. Many properties, they abide by a triple net lease model where any property taxes are then taxed, are passed along to the tenant. Some are not triple lease, and then therefore, if there is a tax exemption, it's impossible really for us to verify that tax exemption benefit has been passed on. So there's some things you can do that. You can exclude lease properties from it and instead replace with a grant program. That's an option. Or you can continue with the current status quo. So as I mentioned, we put together several recommendations. Your Director of Finance is going to discuss this slide and the various recommendations that come. But if you have any questions about the research paper that's before you or anything else, I'm available to assist. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks very much for the presentation. Much appreciated. I mean, this has been a long-standing conversation, and I see it's generated some questions. So I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify that the chart that we have, the tax exemption summary, which is with regards to churches, this is only the portion that we exempt the $26,000. Is that correct?
Mr. Langenmeyer.
The summary you have is only what council has authority over granting or not granting.
Right. And I guess my curiosity is, what's the total number for churches that's statutory if it's not the $26,000?
That is a good question. I do
Okay,
not
for
have
later,
that
you can let me
information
know.
in front of me.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Frisch, and Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. You had mentioned that you were involved with kind of an overhaul of the permissive tax exemption bylaw in Victoria, and I was doing a little bit of reading around exemptions in other municipalities, and I did see something from quite a few years ago. Victoria was looking at kind of overhauling, but I didn't get all the details. But one of the things was, I think, around that church property was bringing that 100% down gradually, and then possibly getting rid of it entirely. And I guess, and obviously Victoria has a lot more churches, so it would be a much larger amount. But are you able to share any of the any of those examples from Victoria? Because I thought that there was also conversation about kind of an equity lens as well in Victoria. So it just seemed like there was maybe a bit of alignment between the Victoria discussions and ours, and just wondering if you could tease a little bit of that out for us.
Yeah, thank you through the mayor. Yeah, the Victoria example, was primarily, I will say, council had differing objectives, but they were able to collaborate and see through a review that accomplished many things. One of the objectives that they accomplished was really they wanted to cap the financial impact of the permissive tax exemption program, period. So they set an overall cap and they said, for instance, I believe Courtney's, it represents about 1.1% of property taxes. So if you got rid of all your permissive tax exemptions, you could pass along a 1.1% tax decrease to your ratepayers. But they didn't want that to grow. So they basically made the manager of revenue, was myself, every year go and look at the value of the proposed exemptions. And if we needed to bring it down, we put a cap on every single one in a fair way. So everyone gets 78% exemption, for instance. So that was one of the things we did. You're correct that there were certain classes of exemptions that they wanted to support and not support. Some members of council really did not want to support independent school exemptions, for instance. They didn't want to support, some members of council didn't want to support place of worship exemptions. So they set a limit on the percentage that could go to those properties, and then they phased it in over several years. Incidentally, the provincial government at the time responded by changing the legislation so that some things were automatically exempt. So your authority, the municipal authority, actually shrank as a result of that. And I'll share another quick anecdote as well. All of the churches went worked with BC Assessment to say, well, this is all the statutory sections. So the statutory sections grew and the permissive exemptions went away. So that happened. In terms of equity, inclusion, other values-based consideration, there was really no changes to that. The City of Victoria did, again, just say generally and broadly, you need to be in alignment, and then council would make that decision on an ad hoc basis as exemptions came to them. But I do know the City of Victoria has several grant programs that do extensively consider equity and inclusion, and they have to pay a specific position to really undertake that specialty, because there are some objective frameworks that they can use, but it's really I would say a specialized line of work.
Great. Just a very quick follow-up. There's quite a few lights on, but I did see a quote in one of the articles, and it says, tax break applicants are not scrutinized to the same degree as grant applicants. And that really stood out for me, because we do get, maybe not an excessive amount of emails about this topic, but I think there are concerns that, it's much harder to apply for a grant and meet all this criteria in a grant than it is for these permissive tax exemptions. So I think, that stands out for me, and I don't know how we reconcile it necessarily. I guess we'll find out during this discussion, but I think that's an important consideration. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moore and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the summary on this report. The question I had was around how we treat housing. It wasn't really specifically pulled out in the report as a separate category, although it does make up, I think, about a third of kind of our what you considered like the nonprofit category. It's so I looked at how other communities are handling affordable housing permissive tax exemptions, and there seems to be a wide range. Many don't allow it at all. They're considered private residences in some communities, and they're just not exempted. And then I saw some municipalities, I think maybe Nanaimo and Saanich, fall into a category of providing a tax exemption in order to make a project feasible. I think Saanich does 5 years, to try and provide some cost reductions at that time when those projects are the least affordable and have the highest debt, which makes a whole lot of sense. But having an ever increasing number of affordable housing tax exemptions that go on as long as the building exists, it seems like we could run into a challenge there, especially because encouraging affordable housing is a huge priority in our community and many others, and kind of not looking at that piece as to whether or not the municipality can afford to not collect the cost of delivering services on those units. And I'm just wondering whether or not you have some analysis that you did do that just wasn't included, or if you have any thoughts on that particular piece.
Yeah, through your mayor. So it wasn't extensively discussed in this project, but I do have experience that I can share around that topic. And I will say, many municipalities differ in their approach to exemptions for affordable housing, supportive housing, and they do define it differently. Victoria was an example where it was supportive housing was specifically defined, affordable housing was excluded. And some of the sentiment behind that was, housing is a provincial responsibility. And whether or not you agree with that and your degree to which you want to take responsibility for housing in your community, would result in what your policy would say. Now, interesting though with affordable housing, so there's a couple things to unpack there. Some municipalities have like a revitalization tax exemption policy. That's a little bit different than a permissive tax exemption policy, but it's a type of exemption policy that can hopefully be used to stimulate redevelopment, maybe redevelopment towards.
We have one, so you don't have to explain that one.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Yeah. So you can use that to support affordable housing, but when you have the situation where you have units built that are owned by specific owners, a tax exemption to those specific owners becomes problematic. So even if you have affordable housing units and owners of that, permissive tax exemption policies can be challenging. And then secondly, what can happen with affordable housing complexes that are maybe run by an organization is they have not stratified. And so what that has done is actually that's suppressed their assessed value anyway. So the value of the property is worth about half of what it would be if it was stratified. So there is sort of a suppression of property taxes in that regard. And lastly, and I believe your director of finance will have something to add to this as well. And lastly, sometimes what happens is the province goes and they designate a property as a class 3 property, which is supportive housing. It's one that they operate and they value at $1. So you're unable to tax it anyway. So there's some mechanism that's in place there. I believe your director of finance had some additional context to add to that as well.
Perfect. So the policy research this time around, we did not specifically look at affordable housing. We looked at what organizations were already in the existing policy. At next week's council meeting, I actually have a recommendation that council consider about furthering the research on really specifically affordable housing and how it fits into our policy, because it is a growing piece of the total exemption volume.
Okay, that's great to hear. Yeah, I just don't want that one to get left. And then like the other comment that I'll make in relation to that is that looking at our current policy, we have paragraph, I guess it's 3C. It has a list of criteria, which I think is a really great list, other than the final bullet is other, which means anything. So I would like to remove that particular bullet because it makes the rest of the list kind of, to me, not very valuable. But if we are removing that other bullet, then there's no housing in the list. So I think we need some specific policy around affordable housing. And it is a little different than typical nonprofit services. So I think it needs its own discussion. So thanks.
Mr. Garbutt?
Yeah, thank you through the mayor. We had I've had some discussions with members of council. I think this is the opportunity to give us some direction to fine tune it. The other category was a hot topic yesterday, both among staff. How did housing get in this list? Because the housing additions have been fairly recent, and housing is a very important aspect. But we also in our research about some of the hiccups that we had, or in the application of this, involved a affordable housing unit that was sold, that subsequently had a tax exemption for a year. So I think council having some strong thoughts will help us build our policy for application 27, which is our desire from this. So I think it is important, if council wants to give direction around the housing, and housing could be limited, and let staff get into this a little bit tighter. The list and the implications of tax exemption is also significantly enlarged for a whole variety of reasons. And so I think it needs to potentially be managed. We have an example from revitalizing tax that was discussed earlier. So I think there's some reasonable stuff for council to give us direction, and then for the next round that we can, I think, just continue to do a better job. I would say 2 years ago, we started this dialogue because of a specific circumstance, and staff who are spending more time on this, which also takes capacity, is learning some of the challenges and making some good recommendations. And I think council is giving us some really good direction in those areas. And the Director of Finance has identified 3 areas, but I would anticipate there are some, kind of specifics or conditions or ideas that some members of council may have that would want to tie to future approvals.
Excellent. Thanks. And I appreciate it being brought up, but one of my main comments tonight was going to be about the fact that housing definitely needs to be on that list, whether or not it replaces other, or other gets defined a little bit more articulately. Yeah, given the fact that we're already doing it, it definitely makes it, I think, clearer for staff. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks for joining us, Chris, and for the report. I gleaned from it that no one in the province, at least from what you've seen, is really doing a really robust job of this. It appears that even those that have language and policies aren't in practice applying things, particularly around the financial need and the financial assessment, which, similar to Councillor Moore, and I think rightfully the public would be concerned. I think that's why we've raised this, and this is in front of us today, because we need to do better and make our policy more robust. And so I guess my first line of questioning for your consultant report as it relates to the financial need assessment. And so you did provide the provincial, as Appendix A, the provincial government's community grant guidelines expert. And you did highlight that in practice, there isn't really anyone that you were able to see, a municipality that is, who's actually applying this. And so from your perspective, given the legislation allows this to be a direction from council, do you see this being something that is administratively possible within municipalities for finance staff to actually verify what is recommended in the provincial grant guideline?
Through your worship, I would say, yeah, it certainly is possible. And it's something that could generally be automated as well. Have the applicants fill it out yourself, and it would populate a bunch of measures that would do it. It essentially said, did you make a bunch of money last year? And, what percentage of that do you have left over? The one little trick about it, I guess, is that if you restrict those funds internally for a different use, then that doesn't go into the consideration. And so very large organizations that have financial means could meet this test, but they have to be using those funds for a restricted purpose. So but anyways, to answer your question, yeah, it could be implemented, it could be automated. It would require additional time from your staff, and so that's something to consider.
Thanks. Mayor, I've got one more and I'll get back in line. Just on the topic of so I will say the 6 recommendations, Chris, that you put forward, I'm actually quite supportive of. The financial need, in the financial needs section of your report, you highlighted the cap, and I think some of my colleagues have spoken a little bit around that, but you didn't actually include that in your recommendation. What's your rationale for excluding that as a potential amendment to our existing policy?
Thank you, through your worship. Well, you know what? It's one of those things where if council is expressing the desire to limit the growth of the exemptions, then that's something you can do. I didn't really interpret that was council's intention. So, you know, that's really it. That's really the only reason why it wasn't in there. A cap is possible for sure. It again adds a little bit of administrative burden, both here and at BC assessment, but certainly practical to implement if required.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And next we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I had a question or two about the lease property considerations. And as I was reading it, it seems like it's either wasn't quite clear whether there's 9 properties altogether in the history of the city or whether there's 9 currently, but it looks like it's 9 currently where leases apply. And I think the total of like taxation from those was around $11,000. So in terms of the 800 plus overall package, it's not a significant component of it. And it also sort of raises questions of if we were to remove that and replace it with a grant, that there might actually be an increase in the number of grant applications based upon that. So it seems like it's a fairly complex thing to do, and it doesn't seem like it's. Do we know if that is a significant concern? If there's a total of $11,000 worth of taxes that are in question here, property taxes, is it frequent that they're not being passed on to the tenants? Because if 90% of the time they are, then we're looking at like a $1,300 problem. And we may be possibly over-engineering it by trying to redesign our policy around that. Do you have any figures on how frequent a problem that is and what sort of funds are involved?
Through your worship.
I was actually going to ask Adam.
Yeah.
I thought he'd probably know more.
Adam has been patiently waiting,
But
so
go
I'm
for it,
gonna
if you
throw him in.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Langemar.
So the frequency is not that common. When it occurs is when you don't have a direct link of a triple net lease. It also occurs when you have turnover in the organizations receiving the benefit and they don't recognize that they may need to talk to their landlord about how that benefit is received. Other times where the linkage is just not as direct as it could be. Some organizations say they receive lower than market rent because property tax is lumped in with their monthly payments. So they may be receiving the benefit, but it isn't as direct as it could be. You hit the nail on the head that it's not a big material amount, but it's an area where we could move to make improvements.
Okay, and I suppose if any options that came back would give us an idea of just how much admin and policy would be required and how frequent the problem actually is. And it sounds like it's more a matter of things not being exactly what they are. So if out of a total of 11,000, there's a 5 or 10% variance, that's kind of the scope of the problem. So, okay, and if I could, actually, I have another question, but I'll get back in the queue because it's a completely different part of this whole thing. But thanks for that, Adam.
Thanks, Councillor, and I'll. Okay, Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Another in my limited research, another thing I came across, which I quite like the idea of it, and it's just something, well, if these things a couple of things can just percolate with the rest of council over the next little while. And one of them was around First Nations or Indigenous organizations. Seashell actually, Port Coquitlam actually gives priority to those organizations. And I don't know if they give 100% exemption, but like I noticed that some of our Indigenous organizations, I don't think any of them have 100%. And I just think that I'm like for council to consider that to be included, because of our commitment to reconciliation. And I just think it would be a good thing to have in the exemptions for Indigenous organizations. So that's one thing. And then the other example I had was Sea Shelt regarding, again, the places of worship. If we look at the criteria for the exemptions, you know, benefit to the community is obviously the main sort of global one. And we know that many places of worship are doing programming that is of great benefit to the community. And then others, it's maybe not as evident. And I know that Sea Shelt actually, they had their church properties eligible for 75% exemption. But if they could demonstrate that they offered community outreach outside of regular church services to the broader community, they'd be eligible for a full 100%. So that's another thing I'd like for us to consider, because it does seem, you know, I know it's not a lot of money, so it's not necessarily about the money, but should we be exempting parking lots with no programming happening when there are other organizations that have very robust programming? And there could be other organizations other than places of worship that also aren't demonstrating that community benefit in a really clear way. But I think that was something that I saw that I thought looked interesting. So I'm just putting it out there for contemplating. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much for that. And off to Councillor, or actually, do you have anything to add, Mr. Lagenmeyer?
No, I just left my mic on.
Okay, just in case. Perfect.
Yeah.
Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. So we did spend a little bit of time, Chris, talking about the value-based criteria. I as well had to do some of my own research because the examples weren't provided necessarily in your report. And I know other councillors have as well. And so like to hear your thoughts on general adherence to statements of value, rather than having the proponents or the applicants demonstrate, like in any other kind of example where they would be applying for funding from bodies. There's a level of demonstration that I think nonprofits are quite accustomed to. And so when I think about value-based criteria, I think there's some kind of statements that we can have within the application that indicate that applicants need to abide by a set of values. We luckily here at the City of Courtenay have, for example, cardinal points, which is articulated in the staff report, as well as some other key components like the anti-racism work and the commitments to reconciliation, rather than actually having a component of the application being the applicant needs to demonstrate how they fit into certain criteria. I'd like to hear, given that you've read over 100 of these, what you've seen out there. I, of course, have only seen a few from my research, but I'd like to hear from you directly.
Yeah, through your worship. Yeah, in my research, I wasn't able to find any application that had specific value-based statements around inclusion, for instance, or other specific social values. However, if I understand what you're suggesting, where there would be a voluntary acknowledgement as to whether or not they meet a value-based statement, that would be a robust way to help your staff objectively screen for you. Yes or no, they agreed that they would adhere to these value-based statements. So that would be, efficient for your staff. They're not making the moral or social judgment as to whether or not they actually do. It would be an honor-based system, of course, but it still might assist in screening the applications for alignment.
Okay, thanks. And if I can, one more. Okay, I'll get back in line.
There's a lot of.
I think Councillor Cole Hamilton's getting us back on track here. So, Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thank you. I had a question or two about the regional service exemption reduction consistency. I can certainly see the logic there. And I guess I wanted to find out, I guess I had two questions. One, probably Chris could answer, which is how logistically complex has that been for other jurisdictions to do? Because I could see that being quite a community where people cross municipal boundaries frequently for work, for school, for all kinds of things, that being able to sift that out might be difficult. So it's the first question. The second question would be probably for Mr. Langemeyer, and that's sort of back of the envelope. If we were to adopt the changes suggested, what sort of impact would that have on the overall amounts of exemptions that we provide? So whatever order.
I can actually speak to, I want to speak a little bit to the regional service exemption. So the reason why that one is one of the recommendations, it has the biggest impact. And that's where I also saw the biggest disparity in council's focus of support. You know, you have these organizations that have been around for years providing a service, and you have new organizations providing maybe a similar service, but the total level of support, one's at 100%, one's at 40%. So really working towards asking those organizations, you know, how many of the people you serve come from the city of Courtenay alone, and how many are coming from Courtenay or Comox Cumberland, and how many are coming from regional areas. You know, the likelihood of the time it would take to pull those apart will take some time. And there's also a number of those organizations could see a significant change in their historic exemption, which my approach is to recommend a phased approach. You know, we dig through, we determine that, yes, you were 100% exempted, but really you're providing a service to the entire Comox Valley. Courtenay's portion should be 40% of your exemption. You might see a $30,000 or $40,000 change in your tax bill. Let's bring that in over a number of years. With regard to the back of the napkin, what is the impact? I don't have those numbers in front of you, but in the fast facts of in the report, you can kind of gauge where the majority of the exemptions are sitting. And in that data list, you can kind of see some of the regional like service providers that are receiving 100%.
Okay, thank you. And I've just said that I think your point about phasing in any changes that happen, they would be in some cases quite dramatic. So that would be a wise approach. But okay, that's good context. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton. And I think there's an opportunity. I mean, at the regional district, there's potentially granting opportunities there, which could capture that whole amount. And the city, if it's part of it, I mean, with that 40% would be gathered there as well. So, because I think that's one of the challenges that, you know, again, some of these organizations historically getting 100%, we give them 40%. But what's the town of Comox doing? What's the village of Cumberland doing? Et cetera, et cetera. So we're doing something to help these organizations, but there may be an opportunity for more than that. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I guess my comment kind of picks up on that as well. That to me, like the regional aspect of who receives services is not, to me, the most pertinent thing that should decide what an organization receives. You know, for transitional services, for example, perhaps the person lived outside of Courtenay, but then once they're receiving a service in a shelter, they're in Courtenay and a Courtenay resident. So like some of it doesn't even really necessarily like fit with what we're trying to do. And in my mind, if we have service providers doing good work that benefits the community, I'm not really that interested in trying to tease out if it's mostly just for people that consider themselves Courtenay residents or if it's Courtenay plus our surrounding community. So to that point, what I prefer is the table that was presented in the staff report of looking at more what is being offered. because I mean, some of these things are absolutely like organizations filling in a role that we would otherwise be doing as local government. And some of them are just really nice to have things, you know, like sports organizations versus, you know, like providing shelter for people fleeing abuse. Like, to me, those are different different things, but yet we're kind of treating them the same way. So I actually would prefer to consider categories and have these organizations tell us where they fit into the criteria or the classifications that we're offering these permissive tax exemptions on. And yeah, and I think it's good transparency for the community. I would also like us to have a little more transparency in, you know, that when we receive these applications that they do go on the public record, and that, you know, if people are interested in seeing not just the list, but also the information that we received that led to, you know, an exemption on property taxes, I think that would, you know, meet our standards more than what our current, our past practice has been. So, yeah, I just wanted to make those two comments. Oh, and then on a similar vein, with regards to the financial reporting, I am in agreement that our current practice of asking for financial statements and the amount of reporting we're asking for is appropriate. I don't want to see us go down the path of analyzing them and determining what the financial need is. It just seems like we would be creating more problems than we're solving with that method. But I do think there is value in asking organizations to provide that information if they're asking for a break on their property taxes.
I would like to recognize that it was a challenging recommendation to make to go with the regional service approach versus the type of exemption. The decision I came to was the method that we've used in the past was the regional approach. I stayed within that frame. It is challenging to do both. So it's kind of, you're either doing the exemption by service type or the exemption by regional. If you stack them both on top of each other, your actual amount of exemptions becomes so low for some organizations that it's really not worth the administrative burden to do it. You're taking 25% of a 40% reduced number already. That's where I found was, where do I go? One method or the other. That being said, we can always fine tune with council direction.
Yeah. The table.
Right. Thanks, Councillor McCollum. And Councillor Frisch, you got bumped, so I'm gonna put you up next.
Well, I was just gonna make some value statements. I thought maybe we get through the clarification questions. Nope. I'm up. Well, so I was just gonna give some of my feelings on the discussion. When I look at the list of exemptions in general, I personally see quite a bit of value to the community. And I've quickly listed out some of the areas like the environment, below market housing, the arts, equity and support for women, children, other equity deserving groups. And I think that's really great. I wonder if just adding, you know, more red tape for organizations is really worth it at this point, and if adding that will add just more administrative costs for the city. So I have that concern with going too deeply into this. There are a couple exceptions on this list that I see, and I suspect other councillors feel. And I wonder if the discussion might be more pointed about our exemptions as opposed to trying to solve our specific problems with certain organizations with a blanket policy that just makes a big mess of it. And I'll just use one example. Hopefully it's a safe one for everyone. ICF, we give a big exemption to them. You know, do we see value there? Can we have that discussion and say, is there value in exempting ICF? If we have a choice, I assume we do. Instead of trying to build a policy that deals with our concern about ICF and have it apply to everyone else, because a lot of these exemptions are pretty small. And there are some big ones, and I think a lot of those big ones we get a lot of value for. So that's my current thought on the whole issue.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And not necessarily to respond to Councillor Frisch's comments, but just for historical reference, how we got to this point was because we clearly found out that this process lacked administrative fairness and our existing policy was not being followed. And we need to create more safeguards given the benefit that this is applied to some in community, and the benefit conversely is burdened by the rest of the ratepayers in the community. And so I actually appreciate that we are having a policy level conversation to create the environment for staff to function in, so that whether it's us as a council here this year or another council in a few years, that we actually have some sort of robust structure in place, and that we continue to maintain some administrative fairness and transparency to the community. I would also just state that I appreciate Councillor McCollum's comments around, again, transparency to the community. I think that when we, and we do, we give notice to the public around the permissive tax exemptions. And I would appreciate seeing those financial statements on a public agenda. I think it's the level of transparency that the public would expect when we're giving, again, some benefits to some while others do not. And I think that would also, to Councillor McCollum's point, if we don't actually have a financial needs assessment that is in the policy that staff implement, then at minimum, council has it within their imperative to review the financial statements and make a decision once the bylaws come forward. And I will just say that I actually, as I said, I'm in favor of seeing all the recommendations from the consultants applied. And I guess the last clarifying question I have is around the one that we haven't spent much time talking about, which in this consultant report is recommendation number 4, which I understand in conversation with the city manager has happened, and I imagine does happen, and that's the property transfer provision. And so I'd like to just hear from staff. For me, that's a really easy addition of a clause in the application that says if you move, you have to inform us, and if you move midstream through the year, you have to pay us back. And so just wondering, that wasn't in one of the staff recommended options, if staff have an opinion on this, and if it's something that they see as easily added to the existing policy and application.
So I can speak to that one. That item is something we could add. One of the challenges with the permissive tax exemption program itself, if a property is sold and the new occupiers do not meet the qualifications, the city doesn't have specified tools that would ensure collection of a refund. Since it is exempt from taxation, we don't have the ability to, once a tax liability is incurred, we have very strong tools to collect that. But this would come as a fine or a penalty, and we have the tools to collect those are not as strong. That doesn't mean a organization wouldn't pay it. You know, a reasonable person recognizes they're getting a benefit that they actually shouldn't get. It wouldn't be unreasonable to repay that. Adding those pieces in is possible. I want to say there's a risk of non-collection, but likelihood is likely low. Also, these properties don't turn over very often, which is another benefit.
Through the mayor and Councillor Jolicoeur, I really appreciate your questions in this regard. I just want to first say the amount of time that staff are paying attention towards permissive tax exemption is probably 8-fold in the previous. And so a statement that we found significant issues. I'm not sure that we'd had significant issues. The way the permissive tax exemption policy was applied was effectively you were in the door, and most of the work by previous administrations was around new applications. We have addressed that explicitly, and people are required to provide that information. So I think I just want to stress that was a excellent finding and direction from council. This specific kind of the property that changes that has a tax exemption, I'm only aware of one. I think it would easy to include as a condition of accepting that permissive tax exemption, a commitment to that. And I'm not a lawyer. However, requirements in property disclosure when things are transferred, it would be incumbent, I think, potentially, and we could get some information on this, that a recipient, if they were in receipt of conditions and then they didn't address that, I believe that there would be a way. I concur with my colleague. We don't have a specific way to catch that, but it is an important signal. And if made aware of that, the organization that was part of this one is like a recipient of a multiple permissive tax exemptions. So that would be perhaps, based on what I'm hearing from council, there could be consequences for people not judiciously following the rules around permissive tax exemption. That sounds aggressive, but this is what I'm hearing from council is that we need to be extremely diligent in the application of this because there's been significant growth, and there should be an equity, fairness, and accountability and consistency lens. So I think with respect to this rare but impactful occurrence, I think council can give us direction. I mean, the finance officer and myself have had this discussion already about almost like conditions for receipt, which would be universal. To add that, and if council wants to give a specific direction on that, they would be appreciated at this point.
Okay, thanks for that. And back to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're probably nearing the end here, and I've got some thoughts, but I will just add to the previous conversation around because I also am in favor of the exemption by type activity, which starts on page 5 of the staff report. I'm not sure if I'm fully in agreement with the percentages that are laid out there, but I like the concept. I think it's clear to the community. It positions a clear policy statement around where we value the types of organizations. I guess my question is the comments around why it would be potentially administratively challenging to layer the regional exemption on top of a type. I'm trying to map out what that looks like in practice as you're assessing the applications. Similar to Councillor McCollum, I feel stronger about the type than the regional piece, but there's some on this list that are at 100% that I know, and I know that they are serving definitely the entire Comox Valley. And so I actually do value the regional service exemption. So I appreciate that you put it in, but maybe if you can speak a little bit more around your thinking around the challenges and a potential solution and being able to apply both.
The challenges of applying both aren't grand. The impact of applying both could very much reduce an exemption to a very small amount, making the purpose of it very much less impactful. That is where I was balancing, how much benefit are these organizations possibly receiving? Is the maybe $100 or $200 that they might receive after the regional and after the type, is that a good use of city resources to administer that program? Because we'd have to go through the process of bringing the bylaws, and if we're seeing value flowing of such small amounts, is that a good use of staff time? Is where it really came down to. The application, it would be as simple as 2 columns on my Excel sheet for the calculation.
Okay. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, just to pick up on that too, I mean, really what we're talking about is essentially reducing a benefit or penalizing organizations that are providing a wider benefit. So to me, like just logically, I just don't understand why that would be the thing that we would choose to reduce. A benefit to an organization that's doing community work is that they're serving a wider population. It just, it makes a lot more sense to me to do it by activity. In looking at a variety of permissive tax exemption policies, like in the Lower Mainland and on the island, most municipalities border with other communities, and I didn't see anywhere that they're doing something like that. It's not very community minded to me. And I'm sure that that comes back to some policy decision at some point, feeling that the city of Courtenay was doing more heavy lifting on it than other places. And I just don't think that that's a good place to start from. So yeah, and then you see that Councillor Frisch has his light on, but I mean, I'm looking at the recommendation on the screen. I did take some notes that I think fairly well capture what we have discussed. And I would say that, well, I guess my list is exemption duration is correct. Changing regional service, this is obviously my 2 cents, into exemption by activity, and then lease property considerations. And then the removal of the other category in the policy was another point of cleanup. And that would then require the addition of specific policy around housing, not-for-profit housing and shelter. And then some additional information on the values that organizations need to represent in order to be included. And Councillor Jolicoeur sent an email to council earlier with some suggested language from another policy that I think is in line with what we're talking about. And in my mind, having something like that in the policy does, at least when we're reviewing these through bylaw, if there's something that is out of alignment, we have something in our policy that says what the expectations are for these organizations to receive it, and it gives council something to point to if there's something that we're not comfortable with. And I mean, Chris made the point earlier that if we look back over, you know, the number of times I've done this, there's like 1 or 2 at most. So I don't think we need a whole new process for it, but I think if we have something in our policy, at least that clarifies what the expectations are, I think that's a service to future councils and also the public. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Right, thanks for that. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So I'm definitely in favor of applying our policy in maybe a more robust way. And we do have criteria. And the question I have for staff is, if we change our exemption duration, could that make up for some of the extra work we're creating by adding in a new criteria? Do you see that as a possibility, or am I just being hopeful?
To be determined. We'll even if we go to that sort of 4-year cycle with as council turns over, there'll always be one-off adjustments, and we'll likely be seeing a bylaw every year for a new organization or one that has moved locations. So I can't give you a good answer on that one.
That's a good point. Every year we will be looking at it anyways, because there'll be, like you said, a new organization applying. Okay, thanks for that.
All right, thanks, Councillor Frisch. And Councillor Jolicoeur,
Yeah,
last word.
Yeah, last word, really just to support Councillor McCollum. And I would say the only thing that I would add is, you know, we got to this point on September, whatever we are today, September 10th, with an October 2023 initial resolution. The resolution clearly articulated we wanted the changes done prior to 2026, which we have to pass by October 31st, so in a month and a bit from now. And so I would just like to hear from staff really clearly if we were to change the motion per Councillor McCollum's additions and amend 2027 to 2026, if that's something council directed that staff would be able to complete in time for the October 31st deadline.
Mr. Garvey.
Thank you through the mayor. I was asked that question, what about the timing? We had some challenges here. Depends on what council scope change is. We can respond. It would take council to give direction on what changes for what term. What would be effective for 26, could be effective in 27. We also have an option to make no changes at all. So we serve at council's pleasure. We potentially, depending on council's direction, we may have to host a special meeting in between. We have UBCM in 2 weeks from now. We have a meeting on the 17th. I acknowledged when questioned by members of council on the timing. We have within our financial services department, we engaged some assistance from a specialist who did a wonderful report that basically confirmed that we're doing in a similar situation to where we are. We haven't answered all of council's questions with this report. And you know, I think we need to get some direction from council, and then we can deliver it and figure out what we can deliver, what's important for council. The determination at a staff level with our available time and resources was to ensure that the council's cardinal directions were reflected in those applications. And then we needed to address some items that were raised previously, including nonprofit daycare centers. So we'll get council's direction, and then we can figure out what we can do in this period of time. The conversations that I've heard in summary around the table is the process needs some fine tuning to ensure, or we can make some kind of fundamental changes in how people are made eligible. I heard acknowledgement around phasing if there's going to be changes made. But at this time, I couldn't say specifically what could happen until we get direction for effective 26, effective 27, and beyond. And Mr. Langmeyer's staff are the ones that have to act on this. I think I would, if I could carry on, because I'm riffing a little bit, duration, conditions, like the conditions that if your circumstances change, I believe that could all be included in effective for 2026. That's just conditions of approval. You know, the scope and breadth of who is eligible, not factoring in a variety of uses, you know, kind of fundamentally changing the list for 26. I'm sure that would be challenging.
And I mean, one of the things that jumped out at me again, you know, when we're looking at the changes that we want to do, and one of the suggestions, which I think I agree with, which is that 4-year cycle, that kind of aligns with probably right after an election, which would be 2027. I'm thinking, but that might actually be too late because of when the election. So I don't know. So if we're trying to align, would it then be that if it were aligning with, and I'm just in my mind trying to get the logistics of if something's done in 2026, but then there's going to be after the election, it's going to be too late because you have to have it in by October, and the election is, I think, in October. So that's a challenge. So would you know, a new council basically get a 1-year runway to kind of get their ducks in an order, so to speak, for that 4-year cycle? So it'd be instead of 2027, which is how I had been thinking about it. It's actually 2028. Does that make sense?
Yes, the duration considerations would really take effect for council who is sitting in 2027, gives them about a year in the seat prior to making a 4-year commitment to permissive tax exemption. And the idea is that I don't want to ask a brand new council when they arrive, what do they want to do?
Yeah, especially if it's new October 31st. Correct. Because yeah, time's funny that way. Mr. Garvey.
Thank you through the mayor, and I'm not going to try and insert myself in a conversation. However, the fact is, unless we limit and say you must only apply at this time, that 4-year term will then roll over. And that's why I guess I would suggest, and I think making sure that we're not offending any of the cardinal points, directing and making sure we have adequate resources in the financial services department to actually unpack this and understand that's just a little nuance. It's a great idea in theory to have a 4-year term, but that in order for that to actually align, then we would only say you have one shot in this time frame to apply for permissive tax exemptions, and then we're not going to consider any for the next 3 years. Unfortunately, that's how my brain works as a planner. We try and break things in those sort of questions. So I think if council has areas of focus that we want to specifically address and say, we want to figure out a way to make this, kind of terms or whatever, that would allow, and we will make sure that there's focused resources and financial services to really unpack these items. I want to look at a practical sense here. But I think that what we're hearing is we want to be consistent. We want to maybe potentially look at that. As an example, we have a 10-year exemption. I know this because I've seen the September 17th report draft. I will say a 10-year exemption has now leased land in that corridor that they should no longer be exempt from. And so we need to address that through a bylaw. So it isn't not complicated. So I said by a double negative, it is complicated. So I think it would, to give the due process and like really strong thoughts. And I know it may be disappointing force and effect not to be in 26, but I think so as to not have either unintended consequences or to not give due consideration to like really substantive issues that will affect as forward-facing service delivery organizations or potentially affect them. I think adequate time should be done. And had we been able to bring this 4 months ago, perhaps we'd have some time for 2026. Those are my thoughts.
Maybe I misunderstood, because what I thought is that yes, there's a 4-year cycle, but every year there'd still be people coming on and going off. And so what I interpreted is that, let's say 2028, if we choose that as like, that's when the 4-year cycle, if that's even what council decides on, in 2029, somebody could still apply, but it would only be for the 3 years, if that makes sense. Or did I misunderstand that?
No, I believe you understood it correctly. What we wouldn't see 95 applications every year. We would have one bylaw that maybe covers 70 applications of the people that are always around. The following year, you might have that new organization or that organization that moved that you could be addressed.
Okay, perfect. All right, appreciate that. Madam Clerk.
Just to clarify the motion on screen, nobody has moved or seconded anything. I have tried to include some of what you've discussed, but I don't think I've captured it all. So that's just there for reference if somebody wants to edit.
Perfect, I appreciate it. And now that I think I understand that 4-year cycle in my lizard brain here, I feel a little bit more confident where I stand. Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Just regarding that language on the screen, I guess when I see the word values, I just see it as being quite open-ended. And I think we talked about how going down that path of looking at the values approach would be quite intensive, and there's not really a roadmap for that. But I did have a chance to read the email, which I hadn't read, from Councillor Jolicoeur, which had some actually different language in it that I think we could look at adding some additional criteria rather than values, perhaps based on some of the discussion that we've had around, we have obviously provides recreational facilities, all these things, but I think we could add something in that list of criteria that would perhaps address some of the asks that we have around. Anyway, I'm not going to read out the email per se, but maybe somebody can come up with that. I would like to. I'm happy generally with this proposed motion, but I would like to ask council to consider putting in Indigenous organizations. We had a talk yesterday, we all attended, that once again drove home the inequities that Indigenous folks experience. And I think that it's one small thing that we could do to, yeah, to help Indigenous serving organizations, which actually, quite frankly, serve the entire community. And, you know, Indigenous folks are overrepresented in everything, poverty, et cetera. So I think that it would be good to include to propose 100% exemption to Indigenous serving organizations, hoping that that could be included in a proposed motion. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moran. And I know it may not be beneficial to read the entire email, but it may be useful to articulate a little bit of that email, because there are some who have read it and some who have not, including staff who are listening and are going to take our information. So I would definitely, for their benefit, again, we don't necessarily have to read the whole thing, but maybe articulate a bit of it. So I am looking to you, Councillor Jolicoeur, and you are in the lineup, but I'll pass it right now to Councillor McCall.
Just to briefly follow up on the suggestion that Councillor Moran was proposing. I think that would, you're meaning not-for-profit Indigenous organizations. Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure that's in there, because otherwise I don't think that we can do it. Yeah, I was going to follow up on the additional information on the values. I think there are, I mean, the language that North Couch, and I think Nanaimo has language around this too. I mean, there's other municipalities that capture this. I don't think we necessarily need to workshop it. I think it's important that we do outline that there are some expectations around inclusivity, and then there's another statement that organizations that disparage others are not eligible for permissive tax exemptions. To me, that captures most of it. It's like, we need some type of clause that says, you know, if this organization is doing you know, counterproductive work in the community, that they don't qualify. So I mean, it's in the email that Evan provided, but it's good to have it here. And maybe that's adequate. And then I think that all the other bullets that are up there captured the list that I got too. So thank you for that, Adriana.
Councillor, thanks, Councillor McCollum, and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. I assume that we'll have permissive tax exemption bylaw consideration come to us this year, and we'll have an opportunity to look over all the applicants and make whatever decision we want on them. That's correct. Yeah. Well, that's helpful, so we can get started there before even any of this work is done. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how this idea of finding out if an organization is disparaging others. By others, I'm assuming you mean other people in the community or other communities. How that plays out. That's yeah, that could be difficult to do, but I mean, obviously we don't want to just support negative comments and yeah, you know, hate speech and such, but yeah, I'm totally in support of looking at a few other categories of changes to this bylaw, just to make sure that it's as efficient as it can be. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch, and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think the only other thing that wasn't captured was the removal of the other category.
Mr. Corbett.
Yeah, thanks through the mayor, and I appreciate the question. So my understanding in talking to staff historically, the other was there if council thought there was, you know, like unless there's some, and I would honor Councillor McCollum his comment that it sort of negates the value. It does give some flexibility. So I just, you know, if council wants to be definitive in the only areas that are available. But I guess I would say that if there was an application that came forward, the council could deliberate on that and give some direction at that point. So
Ultimately, it's a policy, so council can circumvent policy at any point. So I think it's just to remove that within the confines of staff's capacity to communicate with potential applicants. Obviously, applicants can come directly to council and make their case at the time. So I'm in favor of removing it. I think we've captured the missing piece here, at least in the staff recommended types, again, on page 7 or 5 of the staff report, which includes the housing pieces. And I will just share for public record the email that's been referenced. Again, this is clauses that are found in other local municipal governments policies. So services provided by an organization should fulfill some basic need or otherwise improve the quality of life for their residents. Organizations that disparage others are not eligible for permissive tax exemption. In addition to demonstrating adherence to the above eligibility criteria, each organization is encouraged to showcase the value it provides to the municipality, its community impact, and its alignment with municipal objectives. Organizations should detail how they meet the additional eligibility criteria, if applicable, by enhancing community well-being through program services or other contributions, or principal use of the property is service delivery or programs for the direct benefit of the community, or strong commitment to fostering diversity, promoting inclusivity, and or championing conservation efforts, or active and ongoing volunteer engagement plays a role in delivering services and supporting the organization's objectives. Or lastly, provide programs or services, if applicable, that promote equity in the community. So that's just some of the language that is found in other local government policies as it relates to value type statements that ensure that the proponents and the applicants can see themselves in what we're looking to provide benefit for. So thanks.
Thanks very much for that. And Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I think that's all sounds great. I don't know how we put it into the resolution to sort of whittle it down a little bit, but just in terms of the disparage others piece, there was some commentary when Kelowna was going through this in 2025 from an advocacy group that said public funds should not be used to support institutions that exclude or marginalize individuals based on their identity or beliefs. I don't know if that's a different way of, I mean, it's different than disparaging, but I thought that that was, yeah, I mean, I think that that would be a good reason to not grant an exemption if that was happening. But again, all of this is very difficult to, I mean, we ran into this. It's difficult to prove. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. So anyway, just putting that out there. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Maybe another question of clarity. Getting into timelines, if there is some criteria or some categorization, which almost might be a bit of a criteria, the folks, given that there's a October 31st deadline for us, what was the deadline for organizations to apply for a permissive tax exemption, or is there one, or like?
If memory serves me correct, it's May 31st.
Okay,
is our application deadline.
All right, so people who would have applied back in May, if we make changes right now, they obviously wouldn't have been aware of it, but just there's that logistical thing if we make some changes right now for next year, or would it be people who are applying next to May? That's where I'm looking at my council members as to where we're thinking. Yeah. Okay. I'll move on to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, I'm still grappling with the organizations that disparage others comment. I mean, I assume that means that if an organization doesn't agree with another organization's views and they outwardly speak about that, then we're going to step in and say no more exemptions. So, you know, if one group doesn't like a religion or perhaps any religion, and they say, I think religion is a BS thing to believe in, and do we go to that organization and say, look, we've heard these statements said by you or someone who's associated with you, and then cut back on our support for that organization. Is that what we're looking at doing? And does that sound a little bit into the weeds for us? A little bit like we're leading towards a witch hunt here, everyone and anyone who, can be shown to have said something disparaging. I mean, I just find it really hard to parse out what's being said in the community and what that means for this bylaw. I don't know that I necessarily support that policy statement. Although I support the intent of the statement, I just don't know how realistic it is to apply at a policy level.
All right. One other thing, if we're sort of utilizing the sort of list of categories that's in the report is kind of that framework, and we've talked about removing others and then possibly adding in housing. City manager also commented that one of the things that's not articulated in that list is youth. So sports is in there, but not actually youth. And I think there are the youth and seniors.
Yeah, just want to make sure.
Yep. Yeah.
I thank you. I just want to ensure that we're kind of making sure we're hearing council in its entirety, because we're going to need to do some focused work right away, because I would like this to be ready in time for the consideration of the next rounds. So just want to make sure, just in the categories listed in the staff report, if those are the exemption by type of activity was an example there. So thank you.
Yeah, and just given that it's going to be impactful, and obviously we can make changes going forward, but if we're just really articulating and looking at that list and making sure that nothing is being overlooked, because of unintended consequences, there obviously could be organizations out there, if they're providing something that doesn't fit nicely into one of those categories, then we obviously don't want to impact them negatively if we don't have to. So. I don't see any other lights right now, so. Okay, so the recommendation as seen on the screen has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments now that it's been moved and seconded is on the table? Councillor Joker.
Thanks. Just because I spoke to my frustration around us not getting to this for this year, for 2026, which is we're approving next month or the next meeting. Happy to leave this for 2027 per the city manager's comments. I hope that we would use, given that this discussion is happening in September 2025, that those who are most impacted by these changes, and there's a few that will be impacted, will be informed, in part because I appreciate our Director of Finance iterating the importance of a phased approach for those who will be impacted. Some of them, I imagine, will have some significant impact. And so I hope that this conversation, a year and a half, more than a year and a half, ahead of 2027 tax year, allows for those organizations to appropriately plan, and that phased approach, which I imagine our Director of Finance would present something to us when this is ready, could be considered, given that we're considering this now rather than just a year. We're actually considering it more than a year in advance. So prior to the 2027 July tax bill that would come to the proponents. So just a comment around that phased approach. I don't know what your thoughts were, if that was a 5-year phased approach, a 3-year or 2-year, but given that we are pushing this back, I hope that that can be considered in how much leeway we give organizations in your phased approach, whatever that looks like when it comes back. Thanks.
Excellent. And Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to point out that we already have exemptions for not-for-profit Indigenous organizations, but most of them are at 40%, and my intention was 100% exemption across the board. Thanks.
Okay. And I do recall you actually saying that at the time. So yes, that's fair comment. One of the things, and just, you know, this is a major change to this program, potentially with some impacts and stuff, and given the fact that we've said 2027 here, but the next election timeline for folks is 2028. I wonder if it makes sense to say that in 2028, that that 1 year is to learn lessons, and that there may be a mini review or something like that, so that the council that's making changes at that point, if there's any adjustments that need to be done to this process. I don't know if that makes sense, but I look at other things where we've made a decision not knowing 100%, and we said, okay, it's going to come back, and then sometimes it doesn't come back, or, you know, there's stuff that gets kind of lost, and then we're kind of trying to make up for it down the line. Mr. Garbutt, did you want to?
I turned my mic on to ask another question of clarification to council. Sorry, I don't want to. Okay. There's conversations about communications, and I just want to clarify what related to the communications do we want to improve or not doing? I'm just trying to keep notes to make sure we're on track with that analysis, and maybe it's yeah.
All right, Councilor McCollum.
Yeah, just before we move on to that, I just want to follow up on, you've had a number of questions and clarifications around the timing of this longer exemption. But I mean, realistically, the concern is getting clear policy that we can apply in place. If we have that in place, the rest follows. As far as I know, in the 7 years I've been on council, there's been one thing removed. So it's not like the new council is going to come in and have this, you know, complex, uncharted process. We're tweaking policy and changing the timeline. I don't know that it's going to really create a whole new level of complexity. And the idea is just to spend less time on this, for our staff specifically, to spend less time on this annually. And I don't think extending the amount of time that those applications are useful for is really going to impact the next council's decision-making process all that drastically. So I think we're on the right track here.
Excellent. Yeah, and my comments are really just about contemplating unintended consequences, or the things that we don't know because we don't know them. So, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. I mean, 2027 means that the PTEs will be reviewed and approved in October 2026. I'm assuming before the election happens. So maybe it's even earlier than October because of the October 31st deadline. So what I mean by communication is that those who will be impacted by these changes, there's some goodwill on behalf of the city that we inform them proactively that there are changes happening. We articulate what those changes are, and we let them interpret what that is for them. But I just want to be mindful that some of the organizations on this list will see a markable difference in the benefit that they receive next time we receive these.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate that. I see no further lights. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. All right, and we have a grant application, Union of BC Municipalities, Strategic Priorities Funds, and I will pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. This is a second component for the Strategic Priorities Fund. Council may recall where we made an application to support the Eastside Fire Hall. This is an application to the Strategic Priorities Fund capacity building stream for recreation facilities master planning. The staff report in front of you gives an overview of the direction and the scope of the work. And we're really excited to see if we can get provincial support. We think this is a very strong example, and we've been doing so many good things in recreation that this will help us continue that trajectory. And Ms. Saunders is here for any questions if you have any related to it.
Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks. Support the recommendation. Just this is the first time that we're considering a change to our work plan. for the facilities. So is that going to just happen? Staff will work on moving that back. I see that the Florence Fieldberg will still happen as scheduled. But given that we're lumping all the facilities together, that's just, we're pushing that back by a year or two.
Ms. Saunders.
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. Yes, if we're successful in the grant application, then we will push things. And so we're hopeful that there'll be a decision, and we don't have a specific timeline, but by the end of the year. So then we would adjust our timelines. And so the waiting will result in a delay. And also as we're doing the rec strategic plan, we want to make sure that that is far enough along before we start to look at, for instance, facility assessments at Lewis. The Fieldberg, because we have the cultural strategic plan and there's a number of smaller facility improvements we can consider, we would proceed with a narrower scope on that, but the Fieldberg would still be included in the facilities master plan from a large scale planning exercise.
And Mr. Garbutt.
Thanks. And also note, you'll be receiving an update on the strategic plan. We had, as the strategic plan update is written, it doesn't contemplate the receipt of this grant. So just to make sure, on the 17th, you'll have a report that says the timeline is the proposed timeline. To Councillor Jolicoeur's question, if the grant, then we'd have a subsequent edition. I just wanted to point out there could be an inconsistency, but it would be a positive inconsistency because we would have received funding.
Fantastic. I see no further questions or comments. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And external correspondence from business license fee concerns around cannabis retail. And there is a recommendation attached as well. Councillor Frisch.
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize there was a recommendation and. The recommend, okay. I was gonna move receipt and ask staff, does anyone want to, I don't know if you can just second that. Where are we on this? Like, we are doing work and that was stated in the letter that you probably had told them that. So where are we on that work, reviewing
Mr. Garbutt.
the fees and charges?
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, the overall work on business licensing has been delayed. We discussed that when we were thinking about we were talking about a strategic plan. This, if it's okay, I could, the nuance when the ability to legally retail cannabis came forward, there was some unknowns, and at the time, there was two license categories created: cultivation and sales. And just would point out that it was extremely common at that time that those two types were pulled apart. And the commitment at that time was to review specifically. This person has been asking questions through the BIA, and ultimately it's the fact is the sale of other, if I could use intoxicants, is considered a retail use. So a bar or pub is treated the same way in a cannabis cultivation. The sale, like a cold beer and wine store, is just retail. And so an option for council, and we can take action on that, is to just consider it consistent with retail. And that's also another common trend that's been happening. We do still think at a big picture. We've got direction from council on revenue, et cetera. At this point, this is something, if we got council direction to amend the bylaw to remove the cannabis sales, cannabis retail, and treat it as retail, we can implement right away. I would note though, the letter references a late fee.
I was gonna ask about that.
We don't, there is no mechanism to address that. The person chose to not pay their license fee, and the bylaw is prescriptive as to what that is.
And the business fee for this individual or this business is $500. Is that right?
2,500.
It's 2,500.
Yeah, quite a bit higher than
late fee. Isn't actually more than that. Okay.
Yeah, late fees actually probably more than like what Walmart pays, which I think one of the things of it being such a high amount, and it is one of those things where it was in the work plan, but we had a bit of a bunch of legislation that the province put our staff through, so it got delayed. And then what I had mentioned to him, and I'd actually talked with Councillor Cole Hamilton about this quite some time ago, I think now, was that if there was nothing forthcoming by summertime, that we would basically try to get this fast track, just this one thing. The work that staff are doing is actually looking at all the business licenses to make sure that they make sense. So this is really just, you know, potentially what I talked to Councillor Cole Hamilton about was making a change on this one item in the business licenses, and then staff can deal with the more fulsome review in the future.
And two quick questions. How late was this business in paying their fee, and why is it that council doesn't have any mechanism for giving that?
I don't know how late. They still haven't paid. They subsequently paid their next year's business license. They just haven't paid. That's correct, Mr. Langemeier. I think you recall this. I'm sorry, I'll have to get some more information to you on that. Council could direct that we ignore the business license bylaw. In this case, I would, if you're looking for direction, I wouldn't recommend that, in that the business knows the circumstances. We had asked for this letter of concern a long time ago. It did not come. It's now only just arrived. There are other businesses that have paid the late fees because they didn't pay their business license on time. And from an administrative, I would say, fairness thing, I don't see there's a disagreement with the value. There wasn't, as far as I understand, a delay in the delivery of the business. Like, there's no substantive reason why they would have been in a position to pay late. But that perhaps you could ask the business owner that question.
Yeah, thanks for that information. I actually think that I paid my business license late this year and paid a fee. So,
yeah, and
although I don't remember it being $600. So, anyways,
and it's directed at me, but I was not aware that he hadn't paid his business license either. So it was something that he chose not to do, but it wasn't communicated with me. But I was clear from my first communication that, given the amount of work our staff had, that it was certainly unlikely that it would be happening anytime soon. So, and I believe, like, the license was already due, so we would have had to have gone somehow back in time to change it.
Mm-hmm. You're suggesting he wasn't misled into believing that there would be some positive outcome for him if he
I
stopped paying
in the future, but that yeah. So
Okay.
I think that's where the miscommunication was. And had he mentioned to me that he wasn't going to pay it, or that there would likely be a late fee for that. So it just, again, one of those things where I think he might have thought that there might be some leeway. But I think with property taxes, we're in a similar situation where, anyways.
Well, I think that's statutory, but never mind.
Yes, it is. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, I just want to express support that we address this this specific aspect of our business licensing fees. When we first had the discussion around the overall review, came out of the recognition that this is just not really reflective of how these businesses operate, the impact in the community, and how other businesses that actually probably consume more city services are not being charged those kind of fees. So I guess my question to staff is, can we make a motion arising from this correspondence, or to deal with this specifically? And I mean, our city manager made a suggestion of just simply removing this as a category. Like, is the motion as simple as that, or?
Mr. Garrett.
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor McCollum. I had shared some potential with the mayor. Ultimately, pursuant to bylaw 2942, storefront cannabis retailer at $2,500 was added. The fee for retail is where this would handle is under 4,000 square feet. It's $100. So 4,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet is $250. So I don't know how big his license space is, but if you passed a resolution to direct staff to amend the business license bylaw to remove storefront cannabis retailer, and then we would be in a position for the upcoming business licensing to charge retail to at the appropriate size. It's odd that the bylaws in square footage, should be in square meters, but so I have no idea.
In the future.
Yeah, when we do the bigger update, we
Yeah,
can
and then I would,
advance the metric. So I guess my question then is, can we provide that direction now, or would the preference be to request a report outlining that potential change? I'm just not sure which is a more straightforward way of addressing it.
we would need to come back with readings of a bylaw, but you can give us that direction now. We don't need to have a staff report about it. It's relatively simple to address that component. And if it wasn't that simple, we would come back with the bylaw and point that out, and we would undertake a staff report or potentially if that. But if you want to give us that direction, it is business arising from correspondence. My apologies to my legislative services colleagues. Perhaps not the right term, but it's not there isn't a delegation, so we wouldn't have a delay. So.
Okay, in that case, I'll move what is on the screen, which is the council direct staff to draft a bylaw to amend the business license bylaw to remove the business license fee for a storefront cannabis retailer category, maybe? Is there a word missing there?
That's what it's called. It's just called storefront
Okay.
cannabis retailer.
Okay. It's been seconded by Councillor Cole Hamilton. Any further comments? Do you want to speak? Okay. Councillor Hillian.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I support the motion. I just wanted to clarify that this letter's on the council agenda. Is there a response going to the individual?
Well, I communicate with him on a fairly regular basis, but I mean, and you know, depending on the outcome of this vote, I will be communicating that with him tonight. I'll probably be chatting with him this evening.
Fair enough, thanks.
But if we need to write a letter, let me know. But Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And just thanks to City Manager for coming up with a fairly quick and easy to execute solution to this. I think, this was rather high business license fee was reduced with a lack of awareness of what the future held and perhaps greater concern in many communities over what might happen than has. And it's, I think, probably positive on both fronts to see if there's not been a negative impact on our community. And it's time to set this right and make it in line with other retailers. So just appreciate the sort of efficient and helpful response by staff on how to fix that quickly.
Excellent, thanks. And yeah, and one of those examples of something where there was a plan to review it to make sure everything was good, and you know, things kind of got in the way, and it took longer than anticipated. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, I hate to be the odd duckling out, but I'm reminded that the city of Courtenay has also endorsed the recommendations from the Comox Valley Substance Use Strategy, which speaks to municipal policies related to the sale and distribution of drugs, including alcohol and cannabis. And so I appreciate $2,500 is definitely way too high in my opinion. However, without a staff report with comparables and understanding, for example, what alcohol retailers, what the impact is across all of our business licenses under this category. I don't know, do we have 10 of them in Courtenay? Do we have 20 of them? I don't know, and what that impact is financially within the larger conversation of revenue. I'm not willing to support this. I understand the intent from the letter writer and I agree with his concerns. I think this is a policy decision and we're making it without any actual staff research. And I was looking forward to having this conversation at the fees and charges when that work comes forward to council. And so doing this on the fly, I don't know, is $100, $200. Is that how everyone else is charging across the island or in BC? Is that what the alcohol retailers are being charged? Again, I don't have anything in front of me to be able to make an informed decision on this other than a letter sharing some concerns around the fee, which I appreciate and I agree. But I'm not going to support this to move it to the retailer without understanding the consequences of this. Thanks.
Thanks. Mr. Garbutt, I think is going to respond.
Thank you, and appreciate that Councillor Jolicoeur providing a quick response to something that's been out there. Can clarify a couple of things. So in explanation, the cannabis retailing has some related regulations related to their operation timelines. It's an augmentation in our business license bylaw. So my response in that we could treat it the same as retail. Upon reflection, perhaps we could adjust the fee to be to have a size, but in speaking with Mr. Preston, who's not here today, who's the administers our business license bylaw, we can come back to council with that bylaw with options with some more background. And council's under no obligation to adopt the bylaw as presented. The direction would be to produce a bylaw that can address that. The way inside our bylaw, as I had said, a cold beer and wine store, which no longer needs to be attached to the sale of alcohol. It used to be in the past, it had to be a cold beer and wine store retailing of liquor had to be related to a food primary or liquor primary license. That's not the case. So the way our business license bylaw addresses it, the sale of a cold beer and wine store just as a category is treated as retail. So we at a staff level in discussing the letter, that's how the use itself would land. There could be other options, and so happy to come back with a staff report would go along with the bylaw amendment to provide some background. So I think that would it's good feedback. We also acknowledge that we do have the substance use strategy policies, etc. The response at a staff level, though, when we actually looked at how the sale of intoxicants is addressed in our business license bylaw, it is as retail by service area size. So we don't want to have an unintended consequence. We want to maintain the other business license rules within the bylaw itself. But if council wanted to give us some direction on the preparation of the bylaw at a value that would assist us, and we can come back and look at where we're at. Notwithstanding that, we do need to do more work on this. Some of our fees are extremely low, not even close to cost recovery into the processing of a business license bylaw, and that was the work that Mr. Preston was going to be doing with assistance in that area. There's a number of reasons for a business license bylaw. It's no longer really revenue. You have to justify all your fees, but in some cases are not even cost recovering. We do have some outliers within the bylaw itself, and it does need a thorough review because some categories are not even relevant anymore.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And I think that was the challenge, is that because a proper fulsome report is going to take probably longer than the end of this year, it was just going in because the topics you brought up are definitely absolutely important, but to try to answer all those things for the next business license that has to be paid in January is unlikely based where we are right now. Councillor Frisch.
So just to clarify, we can move ahead with this motion, and then next year we're going to be contemplating the business license fees.
Yeah, so when the fulsome report is done, then I think that'll be, a point in time where we'd be able to delve into things from the substance use folks, but also many other things like Mr. Garbutt has talked about, just the fact that the fees are, haven't even been looked at for quite some time. And really the last time they were looked at, cannabis was put in there at a very high amount with the stipulation that it would be reviewed within a couple of years. And here we are 8 years later, looking at it again, right? And so that's the challenge that we're with before. We do have a motion on the floor. I haven't heard any requests to rescind it, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move into council reports. Councillor Cole Hamilton, Councillor Frisch, Councillor Hillian, Schilker, McCollum, Morin. We'll call it a night and adjourn our regular council meeting. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. We'll go in camera first. Yeah. So thanks for moving that, Councillor Frisch, and seconding Councillor Cole Hamilton. And we'll move in camera.
Yeah.